It all begins with the Astery family, who possess an incredibly commanding presence. This family is so powerful that they can easily influence the Emperor himself. They are the most prestigious family of mages in existence, famous for casting out any relatives born without a single drop of magical talent. Inside their palace, a group of maids begins to gossip, and one of them asks if the others have heard the latest news. She shares that the first young master failed to awaken his magic once again, marking his third mana collapse. One of them comments that the second young master will surely become the patriarch, but she is quickly told to shut her mouth before anyone hears. Another maid whispers that, after failing 3 times, it makes perfect sense that the young master completely lost his mind, since he always was a bit eccentric. The head butler appears and asks what the young man has been doing that is so eccentric lately. The maid explains that it all started a month ago, when the young master finally woke up after being bedridden for a long time due to the mana collapse. As soon as he opened his eyes, instead of resting, he spent hours muttering a bunch of nonsense that no one could understand. Right after that, he just ran straight out of the mansion barefoot, without giving anyone an explanation. He went straight to the backyard under a heavy downpour, dropped to his knees, and started digging into the dirt with his bare hands. After digging so much that his fingers were raw, what he finally managed to grab was completely unexpected. To everyone's astonishment, he held up a simple weed with a totally wild expression on his face. Just looking at him, I know this guy is the Prota. The butler and the maid are completely speechless upon hearing that he was doing all that just for some grass. The butler tries to calm the situation by saying the weed was quite rare, but the maids shout back that that is not the problem. The big problem is that, since that day, he spent the entire month pulling weeds without missing a single day. The Prota was thrilled because he had harvested a plant called blue basil. Several system messages pop up confirming the harvest, and he celebrates having another productive day. He claps his hands to dust off the dirt and notices something suspicious around him. He realizes he is being watched very closely again and thinks about how exhausting it is to be the eldest grandson of such an important family. His current name is, Lion Asteri, but he actually used to be a Korean guy named Baek Yi-hyun. In Korea, he worked as a team manager, but he quit on an impulse because he could no longer stand his boss's terrible behavior. Unemployed and with too much free time, he decided to log into an old game he used to play non-stop in the past. He was furious to see that all his old characters had been deleted, leaving only his in-game currency. Undeterred, he created a new character focused entirely on crafting and bought a special package, getting lucky enough to score some amazing skills. He decided to focus on a completely pacifist build to unwind, since he did not want to fight for his life inside a game too. That ended up being his last memory as Baek Yi-hyun before everything changed. When he finally woke up, he realized he had reincarnated as Lion Astery inside the game, 50 years after the final chapter of the story. Luckily, he inherited the original body's memories, which made it easier to adapt to that world while he harvested some water rosemary. Upon harvesting this plant, he unlocks the Novice Herbalist achievement and earns 1,000 shillings as a system reward. The system announces that an exclusive shop will unlock once he accumulates a certain amount of coins. This system is completely broken. The Prota gets strong without even fighting. He figures the shop should open at 100,000 shillings and realizes that if he works hard, he can escape this mansion very quickly. The young man is grateful that the system screens still work and that all the skills he bought are active in his body. Even so, he worries remembering that the previous owner of this body had failed for the 3rd time to awaken his magic. Since the Astery family only values merit, he knows he will be kicked out soon, so he needs money to survive out there. Because of this, he plans a way to gather coins and escape safely from that place as soon as possible. Suddenly, an idea hits him. He wonders if he should offer a bribe to the family patriarch to try and improve his current situation. To do that, he needs to level up fast and get a good item, when he suddenly notices an intense blue glow coming from a bush. Sensing he found something extremely valuable, he moves quickly toward the glow. He uses his hands to pull the mysterious plant from the ground and celebrates successfully gathering it. The system reveals he just harvested a red sun fern, a very rare 3-star item. Lion is overjoyed with the new achievement. He celebrates getting a 3-star item, but in the middle of it, someone calls out his name. He then looks over to see who is calling him. He notices it is the head housekeeper, Sylvia, and she comments that he seems very focused on pulling weeds lately. He says he has his reasons and decides to show her the glowing plant, asking if she can see the light too. She only comments that it looks like a high-quality herb, but Lion insists that it is glowing intensely. Facing the young man's insistence, the housekeeper falls silent and thinks that the servant's rumors about his madness must be true. Sylvia pats his head and confirms that she really cannot see any glow on the plant. Lion realizes that only he can see the magical light surrounding that special herb. She then tells him to return to the mansion, warning him that the patriarch is looking for him since he has not introduced himself since waking up. Hearing that his grandfather is calling for him, the young man immediately grows tense and worried. His grandfather is the absolute symbol of meritocracy, ruthlessly applying the law of the jungle even to his own family members. The patriarch is the perfect target for Lion to build a good relationship with and buy some time before finally planning his escape. Patrick Astery is already looking for him, and Lion panics because he has not prepared any bribe to hand over to him yet. In the middle of his panic, a great idea suddenly flashes through Lion's mind. He asks Sylvia to tell his grandfather that he will present himself a bit later, but first he has a favor to ask. With a smile on his face, he asks if she could help him with a small request before they go. In the mansion's office, the patriarch listens intently to his butler's report regarding the young master's situation. Patrick burns a piece of paper using fire magic and asks if the boy really has done nothing but pull weeds since he woke up. The butler confirms this and reports that Lion still cannot sense mana, but his health and memory are completely perfect. Patrick is visibly irritated by his grandson's lack of talent and lets out a heavy sigh of complete dissatisfaction. Then, he orders the butler to leave them alone in the room. As soon as the employee steps out, Patrick calls for Sylvia, who emerges silently from the office shadows. He asks the housekeeper if she has any idea what that boy is up to right now. Sylvia reports that he keeps pulling weeds, something that all the mansion servants are already gossiping about. She adds that he has expanded his harvesting to the neighboring forest, but Patrick says irritably that that is not what he asked. Sylvia warns him that Lion asked to let him know he will see him later, which leaves the patriarch completely outraged by such absolute nerve. He clenches his fists in a rage, unable to believe his own incompetent grandson has the courage to make him wait. Shouting in anger, he threatens to level the entire forest if the young man does not appear before him. Immediately, Sylvia calmly accepts the order and begins to fade into the shadows to deliver the message exactly as it was spoken. Alone in the office, the patriarch grumbles about his grandson's lack of manners while placing his hand over a glowing orb. He watches Lion harvesting herbs in the forest through the crystal ball, still complaining that his grandson should have come to thank him for getting better. Meanwhile, Lion enters a luxurious room and is extremely surprised as he looks around. He finds himself facing a large amount of top-tier alchemy equipment and artifacts. He realizes that merely asking to use some simple alchemy tools was enough for his grandfather to grant him gear worth a fortune. The young man prepares to test a theory while analyzing the alchemy materials available to him. He opens his skill window to check his harvesting and potion-making levels before starting the repetitive grind. In the game system, mastery ranks go from apprentice all the way to master, a level that only the top players on the server could ever reach. Lion knows that raising this mastery level completely changes the ease of crafting and drastically increases the final item quality. He decides to start slow and plans to brew around 100 basic potions, intending to drink them all by himself afterward. The young man brings his hand close to the steaming cauldron to begin the magical process of refining the ingredients. With a simple command, he activates his extraction technique, and a golden light begins to emanate from his hands. The red liquid flows perfectly into the vial, indicating that the creation of the minor health potion was a massive success. He holds the vial proudly, thrilled by the positive outcome of his first crafting attempt in that world. He drinks the potion in one gulp and celebrates, saying that good equipment truly makes all the difference in alchemy. The panel shows that his health has been slightly restored to 80% and marks the progress of his first feat as an alchemist. He slams the empty vial onto the table and laughs out loud, celebrating that his plan to level up will work out before he meets his grandfather. With a dark, ambitious expression, he lets out a laugh while thinking about the plan he is about to execute. Several system alerts begin to pop up on the screen, showing that he is already very close to hitting the milestone of 100 created potions. After spending hours in the lab, he begins to feel extremely tired and exhausted from drinking so many potions. The young man collapses exhausted into a chair surrounded by empty vials, feeling like he cannot take a single sip more. Since his health is already full, continuing to drink healing potions has turned into pure torture, but he forces himself to take the last gulp. He swallows down the very last bit of the liquid, making a face of extreme discomfort from being so incredibly stuffed. Finally, the system announces that the Novice Alchemist achievement is complete, rewarding him with 1,000 shillings and a new recipe. Lion celebrates the success of his hard work and prepares to analyze the details of the newly unlocked recipe. With clenched fists and a confident smile, he fills himself with determination for the next step of his journey without wasting any time. He throws the necessary ingredients into the cauldron to begin his next great creation. Lion spent the entire time he was harvesting herbs, thinking about what would be the perfect gift to give his grandfather. He ruled out manna or health potions, since the patriarch has plenty of power and medical staff on standby at all times. With that, he decided to create an innovative potion capable of completely curing mental fatigue. The young man knows his grandfather is an extremely busy man, practically drowning in piles of paperwork every single day. Although great mages use mana to reinvigorate their physical bodies, mental exhaustion is something they cannot easily avoid. The wearing down of the mind is a completely different story, making this gift something extremely useful and valuable to him. Looking into the cauldron, Lion catches a fresh, invigorating aroma, feeling confident that the recipe is on the right track. He remembers that, in the game, this mental fatigue potion was considered absolute garbage, only meant to be sold to merchant NPCs. However, now that he is living in this reality, the importance and value of this item are a completely different ballgame. He extends his hand over the vessel and activates his magical extraction skill once again to finalize the potion. The glowing blue liquid floats through the air in an impressive display, revealing the high quality of the product being crafted. Suddenly, flashes of happy memories from his old life in Korea begin to appear reflected in the liquid bubbles. The system notes that the mental fatigue recovery potion has been successfully created, working through the person's happiest memories. Lion is ecstatic to see that he scored a 2-star item, realizing he just obtained the perfect bribe to hand over to his grandfather. He feels his mind clear up just by breathing in the aroma coming from the vial, completely blown away by the incredible power of the product. A new notification pops up on the screen, warning him that he created an item that should be impossible for his current level. Suddenly, a blue energy wraps around Lion's body, and the system announces that his talent for manipulating mana has been activated. The message reveals that he is now capable of controlling the magical energy around him with a precision far superior to other people. A steady current of mana begins to circulate freely through his body, bringing a completely new sensation to him. He stands frozen in the center of the room, trying to process the massive transformation that just took place within his physique. With a smile on his face, he finally understands that this wonderful feeling is the famous mana energy of this world. Lion begins to laugh out loud and celebrate with absolute joy, thrilled to have finally awakened his very own magical power. Outside the lab, his assistant hears the young master's hysterical laughter celebrating his new achievement. He peeks through the crack of the door and sees the blonde guy laughing uncontrollably, which leaves him quite terrified by the scene. The assistant closes his eyes in sadness, believing the young master has truly lost his mind for good after that last mana collapse. Not wanting to intrude any further, the man quietly walks away down the mansion hallway, lamenting the young man's situation. Relaxing in his chair, Lion celebrates that he now has magic and money, which will make his escape plan much easier to pull off. He closes his eyes with an extremely satisfied look, enjoying the peaceful moment after so much hard work. However, he suddenly sits up upon realizing that he completely forgot a very important detail in the middle of all that celebration. He sits lost in thought in the middle of the silent lab until the realization finally hits him, and he remembers what he was supposed to do. He remembers that his terrifying grandfather has been waiting for him at the mansion for quite a long time. In the main office, the atmosphere grows tense with the obvious realization that Lion is extremely late for the meeting. Patrick stares out the window with disdain, unable to comprehend why his grandson is pushing himself so hard just to craft a potion. Patrick looks back on his own legend as one of the core members of the hero party that fought terrifying dragons in the past. He is the powerful leader of the Astery family, a man so influential that he could easily found his own country if he wished. He grumbles that he could provide a comfortable life for his grandson without any effort and does not get why he insists on wearing himself out. Patrick states that there is no lack of money or power in the family, and Sylvia silently understands that the patriarch is just worried. She decides to speak up and tries to bring a different perspective to comfort the man. Who keeps his arms crossed, Sylvia reports that she could see genuine happiness on Lion's face while he worked hard on crafting his potion. Patrick rubs his head in frustration and fires back, saying that happiness is useless when danger seems to be lurking right around the corner for the boy. She agrees, remembering that surviving 3 consecutive mana collapses is something practically unheard of in reality. While Lion walks toward the office accompanied by a guard, she only hopes that the young man can live out his days in peace and good health. A firm knock echoes on the office door, cutting off the worried conversation between the patriarch and the housekeeper. The assistant opens the door and formally announces the arrival of the first young master, who steps in with a slightly awkward smile. Lion approaches his grandfather's imposing desk and bows politely, sincerely apologizing for the massive delay. With a cold and piercing gaze, Patrick asks the reason why he took so long to come present himself. Since getting out of bed, Lion maintains his posture and answers calmly, explaining that he had many things to reflect upon after going through that last mana collapse. He adds with complete honesty that everyone in the family knows very well that he does not possess the slightest talent required to practice magic. Seeing Sylvia's sad expression, he smiles gently to reassure her, saying that it is completely fine and that he accepts this fact. Looking down at his own hands, he confesses that deep down he simply refused to accept that his body was unable to tolerate the flow of mana. He explains that the moment he accepted that harsh truth, he felt like he would no longer have a place in the prestigious Astery family. However, the young man states that things have changed and holds out the blue potion toward his grandfather, showing the result of his acceptance. He explains that he studied hard to create something useful and become someone who would not embarrass the proud family name. Lion smiles gently and confesses that he prepared that special gift, thinking about how exhausted his grandfather must have been lately. Patrick stares deeply at him with his sharp eyes and wonders internally what all of this truly means. The patriarch notices that there is something very different about his grandson, going way beyond his posture or expression, as if something fundamental in him changed. He looks at the glowing blue vial and realizes his grandson spent all that time working hard just to create something for him. The old warrior's heart softens facing his grandson's thoughtful gesture, finding the young man's effort completely admirable. Still, Patrick tries to regain his usual firm posture, reminding himself that he has already reached the level of a transcendent being. He thinks that his body is immune even to the worst poisons, doubting that a simple potion like that could have any effect on him. But the thought that his grandson did all that thinking exclusively of him makes the old man melt with pride and burst into a loud laugh. He quickly tries to piece back his usual stern expression and asks if his grandson has finished saying everything he wanted. Patrick says he understands and gives the young man permission to leave, and Lion says goodbye with a respectful bow and a light smile. The young master leaves the room, and the heavy office door quietly shuts right after, leaving the two older individuals alone. Sylvia giggles quietly upon noticing the joy written all over his face, but Patrick tries to bashfully deny it, saying she is being ridiculous. Putting the teasing aside, the patriarch goes back to analyzing the small blue vial with a very serious and intrigued expression. While holding the glowing vial in his hand, Patrick comments that the potion brings him a strangely familiar feeling. Sylvia suggests using a special analysis method to ensure the safety of the drink, but Patrick immediately dismisses the idea. He states that he simply wants to enjoy and truly appreciate from the bottom of his heart the complete sincerity of the gift he received from his grandson. The housekeeper understands his decision, bows, and decides to step out of the office to leave him alone for a moment. Now, alone in the room, Patrick finds himself thinking about how long it had been since the last time Lion had given him any sort of gift. He praises the excellent quality of the vial, knowing that crafting something like this requires a vast and deep knowledge of alchemy. Although he feels the effect will be zero because of his immense power, he decides to drink it anyway so as not to waste his grandson's gesture. He brings the vial to his lips and drinks the mysterious glowing blue liquid all at once, waiting to see what happens. As soon as the liquid goes down his throat, a gentle and purifying wind seems to blow through the entire silent office. At that exact moment, Patrick feels a deep wave of calm and tranquility wash over his heavily exhausted mind. Several happy and fragmented memories of his glorious past as a hero begin to gently surface in his head. Without even realizing it, he ends up falling into a very deep and relaxing sleep that lasted only a few minutes. Despite being a very quick nap, the dream he had was incredibly sweet and filled with absolute peace. Slowly, the powerful patriarch begins to open his eyes as he wakes up from this invigorating moment of rest. He is surprised that he actually fell asleep, but notices he woke up feeling extremely light and completely refreshed. Looking at the empty vial, he realizes with shock that his constant and terrible headache has completely vanished. The blue sky shines brightly outside the grand window, reflecting the new energy and clarity that the old man now feels. With a light smile on his face, he lets out a sigh and comments that the blonde grandson always ends up doing exactly what he wants. Patrick reflects that he cannot just lock his grandson away simply because he is weak, and that he needs to find a permanent solution for the mana collapses. The old warrior wishes to live a long time alongside his grandson, while Lion himself out in the garden begins to tear up without understanding why. In the garden, a group of servants begins to spread a shocking rumor that the young Master Lion is about to pass away very soon. A maid comments that he even handed over a farewell gift to his grandfather, suggesting that his daily habit of harvesting herbs had a sad motive behind it. Another servant laughs out loud maliciously, saying that the boy must have just been looking for a good spot to be buried in the garden. Suddenly, someone slams a heavy bucket onto the ground with massive force right next to him, instantly terrifying the gossiping servant. He offers an awkward apology and runs away from there along with the other gossiping servants to get back to work. The assistant approaches and asks if the maid Hannah is doing all right, and she answers angrily that yet another servant assigned to look after Lion just quit. He is highly surprised, and Hannah explains that the others used to brag about how easy the job was because the young master barely caused any trouble. She complains that now everyone is running away because of these silly rumors, showing a terrible lack of loyalty to the family. Hannah keeps venting about the servant's ingratitude when the assistant warns her in a panic that someone very important is standing right behind her, turning around. The maid goes completely pale upon coming face to face with the housekeeper and chief of staff right there. With a calm and intimidating smile, Sylvia asks her to tell the whole story behind this bizarre rumor in full detail. A little later, the assistant hurries toward the main entrance and apologizes for the delay in getting there. Patrick says it is perfectly fine and asks if there was some sort of emergency at the mansion to justify the delay. Meanwhile, the gossiping servants are seen being kicked out of the mansion at night with their bags packed while the assistant changes the subject. Patrick falls into complete silence, trying to process this whole absurd situation he just uncovered about his grandson back in the office. Sylvia asks to analyze the vial using a very powerful technique called the witch's eye. A glowing pink magic circle surrounds the small vial to thoroughly scan all of its properties. The patriarch stands up in surprise upon noticing the results and states with absolute conviction that this potion could never have been made by Lion. Sylvia stares at the vial with a serious expression and asks if this could actually be the legendary hero's potion. She is referring to the great hero of the world, who mysteriously vanished 50 years ago after putting an end to the war against the demons. This hero was an incredibly powerful being, to the point where there was no dungeon in the world capable of trapping or holding him. His strength was so absurd that even the gods themselves hesitated to stand in his way or face him in combat. She squeezes her own hands tightly, thinking that perhaps only that hero could find the hidden contract and free a certain person. Patrick agrees, but says they cannot jump to conclusions, as the real hero's potion should exhibit an even greater effect. He narrows his eyes thoughtfully, mentally analyzing other possibilities that could explain the mystery of that potion. The patriarch dismisses this theory for good, as he knows it would be impossible for his weak and incompetent grandson to be the legendary hero. Either way, he reveals that he intends to ask Lion for an even better potion to help his sister break free from her deep slumber. He explains that his sister has been in a state of stasis for centuries, and that if the potion worked on him, it might have an effect on her too. Hearing the patriarch's ambitious plans for the young master, Sylvia lets out a light laugh of satisfaction. Patrick joins her and begins to laugh out loud with joy, feeling like he has finally found real hope for his beloved sister. She thinks to herself that worrying about an immortal and immensely powerful witch is the most useless and pointless thing in the world. Sylvia tells the patriarch that he does not need to worry his grandson with her problems, but Patrick tries to argue back with a bow. She thanks him from the bottom of her heart for the genuine worry and affection that young Lion showed for her. The old man watches the housekeeper walk away, while thinking fondly of his dear sister who remains asleep for so long. The next day, Lion returns to the office and comments that his grandfather seems to have a rather worried look on his face. Patrick tries to mask it immediately and fires back with disdain, saying that is complete nonsense from the boy Lion, begins to crack several funny jokes about his age, and Patrick turns red with anger at his grandson's absolute nerve. The young man finally hits the nail on the head by asking if the issue was about the potion, making the old man admit the truth in surprise without beating around the bush. Patrick gets straight to the point and asks if he would be capable of crafting a version of that potion with an even higher quality. Lion falls deep in thought and knows that, with his old skills and equipment, it was already very difficult to manage making a 2-star item. He remembers that the past harvest required a lot of luck and that high-level rare herbs are becoming increasingly scarce in that region. Even so, the young man knows he cannot pass up this incredible chance with such a rich and powerful investor deciding to accept the challenge. With a serious look, he asks his grandfather what exactly that new high-quality potion would be used for. Patrick answers by revealing that he intends to give the item as a gift to the head housekeeper, leaving Lion completely shocked by the news. He imagines that a romantic spark is flying between the two elderly folks. But the system quickly warns him that it is nothing like what he is thinking. Thinking his grandfather is just lonely, Lion asks for a 2-week deadline to manage crafting a much better version of the potion. Patrick is quite surprised by the requested time and repeats the question incredulously to the young man. Lion panics, cuts the deadline down to just 1 week, and runs out of the office before his grandfather can say a single thing. The young man celebrates as he runs. Knowing that this is his big opportunity to win the absolute trust of the head of the family, Patrick extends his hand completely baffled, finding both amusement and a bit of confusion in his blonde grandson's rushed attitude. Back in the forest, Lion begins to calm down and wonders how he will create such a difficult 3-star item in so little time. He knows there is no time to level up, and that even if he buys expensive herbs, he might still not be able to use them in the best possible way. Suddenly, a light bulb goes off in his mind, and he decides to check the options available in the system's virtual coin shop. He opens the shop panel and finds out that the item descriptions are hidden because he has not accumulated enough shillings yet. Lion analyzes the list of common tools and complains out of sheer outrage at the absurd prices the system is charging for each simple item. The young man grumbles about the high prices even for old items and decides to check if the other tabs in the shop are just as expensive. He is startled to see that simple magical seasonings cost 10,000 shillings, realizing he will not be able to buy anything there for now. With the shop out of the question, he realizes he will have to resort to the traditional harvest method if he wants to meet his deadline. Lion knows there is a limit to the amount of rare herbs he can gather just by using his own hands in the middle of the woods. He concludes that he urgently needs high-quality tools, and the sound of rhythmic hammering begins to echo in the background. Inside a noisy workshop, a dwarf blacksmith works hard shaping hot iron while his assistant calls out to him hurriedly. The dwarf blacksmith complains angrily about being interrupted in the middle of so much work, but the assistant insists that he come look right away. The employee excitedly announces that an incredibly wealthy client just arrived at the shop, immediately sparking the blacksmith's curiosity. The blacksmith steps out grumbling that he only intended to push expensive items onto the wealthy client, but runs into young Lion waiting outside. The dwarf blacksmith is in absolute shock at Lion's question about whether he is the owner of that workshop. Dressed in expensive and elegant clothes, Lion politely asks if he could have the experience of working in their forge for a single day. The young man quickly makes it clear that he does not intend to do this for free and pulls out a massive bag of coins to pay for the favor. He shows that he is willing to pay a generous amount of gold to ensure. The blacksmiths are completely satisfied. Just before this, Lion was analyzing some hoes displayed on the street and thinking about the quality of his harvesting tools. He realized that the common hoes were of low quality, as elite blacksmiths are usually far too busy crafting expensive weapons. Even if he used his family's influence, he knows it would be impossible to obtain a top-tier tool in just a single day. Because of that, he decided to go personally to the forge and ask to create his own harvesting tool using their facilities. Lion flashes a big smile while promising that he will reward the workers with an absurd amount of gold coins. Seeing the blinding shine of that bag full of gold, the dwarf blacksmith lets out an impressed and greedy sigh. However, the blacksmith complains to his assistant, saying he already has a headache and does not want to waste time with nobles' games. Honestly, the assistant returns part of the gold, explaining that that amount is excessively high just to craft a single hoe. The assistant warns the young man to watch out for scammers, while Lion just laughs awkwardly since he had given too much money on purpose. The assistant takes a deep breath and prepares to give a more detailed explanation of how things work around there. The dwarf blacksmith approaches Lion and asks provocatively if a delicate boy like him really wants to forge a tool. Dwarves are known throughout the world as the definitive race of unbeatable artisans and blacksmiths. They possess extraordinary physical resilience, being capable of putting their hands directly into the fire without suffering any burns. In addition to their absurd physical strength, dwarves are considered absolutely unmatched when it comes to precision and attention to detail. The dwarf blacksmith crosses his arms with an imposing posture and directly asks what the blonde young master's name is. Lion introduces himself politely, but the dwarf quickly recognizes him as the famous weirdo everyone has been talking about in the area, careless about titles. The dwarf orders a space to be prepared for the eccentric youth to work, leaving his helper in a total panic. He points to one of the free furnaces, and Lion happily thanks him for the opportunity and the blacksmith's sincere hospitality. Lion tries to ask the dwarf's name, but notices in surprise that the master blacksmith has already turned around and walked away without paying any attention. The assistant explains that his brother's name is Mudu, introduces himself as John, and asks Lion to follow him into the forge. John begins to guide the young man through the facilities, proudly showing off the various pieces of equipment and weapons displayed on the shelves. The blacksmith tells him to feel free to look at everything, while Lion admires the workshop with a bright look of pure curiosity. John explains that the finished tools in that section are the same ones that are usually displayed for sale in the front window. Seeing the hard work of the blacksmiths, Lion notices that they use excellent gear and are extremely meticulous, but feels that something is missing. He observes the displayed tools and wonders, intrigued why the final quality of the product still seems so far below expectations. Suddenly, a strange movement in the middle of the fire catches the young man's attention, and he turns quickly to try and get a better look. The system warns him that a low-level fire spirit is watching the young man, revealing that it looks much weaker than normal. Lion approaches the furnace and asks John if the fire there has always been weak like that. John scratches his head a bit awkwardly and admits that, while it is not completely dead, the fire has definitely seen much better days. The blacksmith Mudu suddenly appears and confirms that the heat has dropped significantly, asking in surprise how the blonde noble managed to notice that. With all the calm in the world, Lion simply answers that the fire itself told him that, leaving the dwarf blacksmith in absolute shock, Mudu was about to start explaining how to make a hoe, but cuts himself off shouting, and grabs the young man upon hearing that unbelievable revelation. Mudu orders John to leave immediately so that he can talk alone and in total privacy with the young master. The dwarf takes the young man to a more isolated spot in the garden and stares at him with a serious and rather mysterious look. With a piercing gaze, the dwarf blacksmith asks if the young man really saw that, and Lion confirms without hesitation that he did. Mudu asks hopefully if the young man would be capable of solving that problem, and Lion answers calmly that most likely yes. The dwarf blacksmith promises that if the young man really fixes the fire, he will personally make sure to teach him the entire art of blacksmithing. Mudu adds that he will give absolute priority to all of Lion's orders from now on, leaving the young master quite surprised. The young man knows that that workshop is so famous in the kingdom that it receives major orders coming from several neighboring territories. Realizing the invaluable worth of that incredible partnership proposal, Lion accepts immediately, with a large and enthusiastic smile on his face. Mudu explains internally that he worked to the point of exhaustion to expand the workshop, but now the fire spirit ended up losing its strength. Without the fire spirit, the quality of the products drops heavily, and Mudu is desperate because, as a dwarf, he cannot communicate with spirits. Despite finding Lion weak and unreliable, the blacksmith knows the young man is his only hope because he is able to see the fire spirit. Lion listens to the magical creature and warns the blacksmith that the little fire spirit is complaining of being very thirsty right now. The young man suggests throwing some water to help, but Mudu shouts back outraged, saying that throwing water on fire is complete madness. Lion asks the stressed dwarf to calm down and explains that they need to give the spirit something it can actually consume without being put out. Mudu says desperately that if the young man fixes the fire, he will give him his absolute masterpiece or anything else he wants. Lion asks if the blacksmith is serious about that promise, and the dwarf confirms with all the seriousness in the world. With the deal closed, the two seal the promise with a handshake, and Lion promises to start working on it that very night. Night soon falls over the dwarves' forge, bringing a starlit sky and a bright full moon on the horizon. Back in the lab, the young man lets out a tired sigh and realizes he ended up working overtime in this world too. The system warns him that the little fire spirit is complaining of being very thirsty due to so much work, and Lion promises to help it soon. Lion understands the little spirit's pain from working too much in that massive forge, something that makes him look back on his old life in Korea. Knowing the creature needs to recover its energy, he decides to craft the special water rosemary essential oil recipe. He explains that, although the plant is salty, when refined that way, it becomes a perfect oil for spirits to consume. The bright green oil is successfully finalized. Wafting an extremely fresh and invigorating aroma throughout the lab, he gently pours the green liquid over the flames, causing the fire spirit to begin absorbing the oil with absolute joy. The little spirit is extremely happy, but the system warns that its thirst has not been fully quenched yet, and Lion promises to make more. The young man gets back to work with dedication, squeezing the fresh water rosemary leaves to extract every single drop of oil. Finally, the fire spirit quenches its thirst completely, and its vital energy is fully and brilliantly restored. The spirit shows immense gratitude, which earns Lion 30% experience points in his attunement skill. Mudu comes running into the room with open arms and shouts excitedly, celebrating that the young man actually managed to save the fire. The dwarf blacksmith stares at him with tears in his eyes and a look of deep respect, finding Lion to be an absolutely incredible young man. However, the young man begins to sway from exhaustion, and the dwarf asks worriedly if he is feeling all right. Lion displays a weak smile and tries to reassure him, saying it is just fatigue from spending the entire night awake working. Suddenly, the young man's body can no longer handle the extreme fatigue, and he faints onto the forge floor, throwing the dwarf into a panic. Mudu completely loses it, seeing the blonde youth unconscious, and screams, begging him not to pass away right there. The sun rises on the horizon, and a peaceful white smoke begins to gently drift up through the forge chimney. Two cute, green-eyed children observe Lion with curiosity and ask happily what the blonde big brother's name is. Before Lion can answer, the little ones introduce themselves with sweet nicknames like Golden Bough and Jade Leaf. The two children share a happy laugh together, and Lion smiles, noticing how united and affectionate those siblings are with each other. He remembers that he also has a younger brother in this world, but recalls that the boy was cold and did not seem to like him very much. He shrugs while eating, thinking that there are no issues as long as they do not cross paths. Since he has no interest in leading the family, Lion interrupts his thoughts upon hearing the children's mother calling for them from the dining room. The woman asks her kids to go play somewhere else and leave the guest to eat in peace, but the children think his name is Young Master Lion, lets out an amused laugh and tells the children that his real name is Lion, making the little ones repeat the name excitedly. The little boy says he thinks the title Young Master is much cooler, and Lion accepts the nickname in a sweet and gentle manner. The children run off laughing through the house, while the mother scolds them for continuing to interrupt the guest's meal. The mother apologizes for her children's rowdiness, but Lion praises the delicious soup and says it is wonderful to see the little ones full of energy. She confesses with a worried look that she was extremely shocked when her husband brought the fainted young man home that morning. She offers deep thanks for Lion, solving her husband's problems, but the young man says that the rest and the food were already reward enough. The door opens, and the blacksmith Mudu enters the house asking if the young man slept well, being greeted by joyful shouts from his kids. The little ones run to hug him and ask if the young master saved the fire spirit. While Mudu smiles with his cheeks covered in soot, Lion watches the family scene with a warm smile on his face, while Mudu calls him to return to the blacksmith workshop. The dwarf blacksmith takes on a confident expression and warns the young man that he has already left everything fully prepared to start working. The young master follows him back, highly curious to know what the dwarf prepared that is so special for him. Upon entering, he sees several top-quality tools ready, and Mudu guarantees that all of Lion's orders will always be absolute top priority. Next, the blacksmith says that that is not the most important thing right now and gestures for the young man to follow him to the back of the shop. Looking at what was stored there, Lion widens his eyes in shock and asks if what he is seeing really is refined iron. Mudu shows a massive pile of pure iron bars, explaining that he prepared the material in advance to prevent the young man from fainting again. Lion comments that the dwarf is taking the teaching very seriously, and Mudu fires back, saying he would not allow the young man to just wing it carelessly. The young man turns red and guarantees he wants to truly learn as soon as possible, leaving Mudu satisfied and ready to start the practical demonstration. The dwarf blacksmith positions himself before the blazing furnace and explains that the foundation of all blacksmithing lies in controlling the correct temperature of the iron. Mudu shows the glowing metal and warns that the red color does not mean it is ready, and that overdoing it will cause the metal to melt completely. The iron hits a perfect bright yellow tone, and the dwarf master shouts firmly, indicating the exact moment to start striking. With precise blows that scatter sparks across the room, Mudu demonstrates the strength needed to thin the blade while keeping the structure durable. Mudu explains that, after shaping the basic form of the metal, the next step is to refine the details and sharpen the blade with a whetstone. To finalize the entire process, the dwarf master blacksmith tightly fits the wooden handle into the head of the hoe. Mudu displays the fully finished hoe to an impressed Lion, asking playfully if it was not something quite simple to do. The dwarf brags, saying it really would be difficult for ordinary people, while Lion asks if he can already start using that whole pile of iron. Mudu gives permission, and Lion begins to carry several heavy iron blocks at once. Leaving the blacksmith quite confused by his agility, Lion simply throws all the iron at once into the blazing furnace, causing the master blacksmith to scream in despair at such madness. With an extremely confident look alongside his little fire spirit friend, Lion calmly says he is going to make an attempt. The young man begins to hammer the metal relentlessly and admits that, although he already expected it, the work is even harder than he imagined. His first attempt fails miserably, resulting in a twisted piece of iron beyond repair that will need to be melted down completely all over again. Although it is highly exhausting, he refuses to give up and knows that if he keeps trying, he will eventually achieve success. The young man keeps trying time after time, and the system notifications show that his completion progress is steadily rising. Lion places the iron block back into the spirit's fire and prepares for another attempt with absolute focus and determination. He raises the large iron hammer and strikes the glowing metal with precision, following the exact correct rhythm of the process. With a swift movement full of magical energy, he lands a perfect strike on the metal, scattering bright sparks through the workshop facing his persistence. The system congratulates him on awakening the novice blacksmith talent, leaving Mudu shocked by the young man's evolution. Impressed by the golden glow and the perfect shape of the red-hot metal, the dwarf blacksmith excitedly says for them to use that piece. Mudu notices with astonishment that the energy and quality of that metal seem completely different from anything he has ever seen before. The dwarf takes over the work and begins to polish the blade with mastery, generating a shower of bright sparks under Lion's watchful eye. Next, he fits the wooden handle into the newly forged metal head with surgical precision to finalize the new hoe. Holding the bright item at 100% completion, Lion celebrates and sees that he created a perfect tool imbued with the power of fire. Mudu shouts enthusiastically that he has an absurd talent, stating that that hoe is better than what most ordinary blacksmiths could ever manage to create. The dwarf insists that he should celebrate even more, but Lion says that right now he just intends to take a very quick rest to recover. With an excited smile full of energy, the young man surprises the blacksmith by asking to be taught how to craft a harvesting sickle. Next, Mudu makes a funny face of complete incomprehension, unable to believe the relentless determination of that blonde young master. He bursts into laughter and praises the young man's absurd drive, finding his attitude genuinely amusing and contagious. The dwarf happily accepts to teach everything he knows, while Lion celebrates knowing that his plan to help his grandfather is progressing very well under the bright light of the full moon in the middle of the dark forest. The young man promises himself that he will make his grandfather's wish an absolute reality. The wind blows gently through the trees of the dense woods, creating a calm and silent atmosphere under the territory's night sky. Suddenly, the silence of the night is broken by the sharp, firm sound of a hoe being driven with massive force directly into the damp soil. The system reveals that he just harvested a one-star finger ginseng root, a special ingredient highly useful for restoring vitality. Sitting on the ground, Lion is impressed to realize how a high-quality hoe facilitates the perfect harvesting of such delicate items. With an analytical and thoughtful look, the young master realizes that the advantages of his new hoe go far beyond the ease of harvesting. He notices that, while carrying both the new hoe and sickle, new glowing paths and rare plants begin to appear around him in the forest. The young man displays a confident smile, knowing that obtaining a perfect 3-star potion will be entirely possible if he trains a bit more. Determined to reach his goal, he kneels down on the dirt again and prepares to keep digging until he perfectly masters the technique. He successfully harvests some leaves and shoots of a 1-star banana sweet potato, which serve perfectly as a good food source. He observes the hole in the dirt and excitedly confirms they are legitimate sweet potatoes, meaning there are many more of them buried down there. Suddenly, the hoe in his hands begins to emanate intense flames, leaving the young man totally startled and clueless about what is happening. The system warns that the fire spirit's blessing on his hoe has been activated, delivering him a perfectly baked sweet potato on the spot. Upon reading the description, he realizes with joy that the blessing can instantly bake any edible food, finding that an absurd stroke of luck. He analyzes the baked potato in his hands and is impressed by managing to get such a well-prepared food item with just a single dig into the dirt. Catching the delicious scent of the hot food, Lion decides to take a break from harvesting to eat that mouth-watering baked potato. He bites into the baked potato with great appetite, but ends up burning himself a little due to the food still being extremely hot. Despite it being hot, he blows on it and keeps eating with enthusiasm, finding that baked sweet potatoes taste even better this way. He chews happily while thinking that the real secret to eating baked sweet potatoes is consuming them very hot. Almost burning your mouth, Lion savors the sweet and soft food, delighting in the unique and comforting flavor of that root perfectly prepared by magic. He feels that this wonderful combination is just as tasty as eating a warm sweet potato, accompanied by a glass of fresh milk. Sitting calmly on the green grass of the forest, the young man happily celebrates the fact that he secured such a tasty and comforting meal. However, the peaceful moment is cut short when a small, chubby white pigeon gently lands on the grass right in front of him. The little bird stares at him intently with a begging look, making Lion ask warningly if he would also like to get a piece of the potato. Lion tosses a small piece of the baked sweet potato onto the ground for the bird to eat. The little bird pecks at the food and loves the flavor, making the young man laugh and tell it to eat up. He comments that he had a similar friend when he used to play the game and confesses that now he wonders if it is doing well. After recovering his energy with the sweet snack, Lion decides it is time to start harvesting the ingredients for the potion. The young master smiles with the bird on his shoulder and thinks that first he should harvest a few more sweet potatoes. Meanwhile, inside the grand castle of the Asteri family, a heavy sigh of worry echoes through the gardens. John is panicking because it has already been 3 days since Lion left home to go to the forge and wonders if he should go after him. He realizes the young master has not returned yet and is startled to notice the presence of another person nearby. He finds himself facing Sylvia, the head housekeeper of the mansion, who observes him with her always serious and commanding posture. John says he is very worried, especially with the rumors that the young master is going to pass away soon or be kicked out of the family. Suddenly, Lion appears smiling, waving at them, and asks if everyone was out there waiting for him. The young assistant runs desperately up to him and asks in a panic what kind of miserable state that is, but Lion says he is fine. The young man gives an awkward laugh and tries to calm them down, saying it is nothing out of the ordinary. John questions how the air ended up like this and asks what little bird that is on his shoulder, leaving Lion confused. Lion looks down at the tiny bird and wonders in surprise at what point it started following him. Sylvia slowly approaches Lion and calls his name in a calm yet very serious tone of voice. She says he can stop with that now, and Lion asks if she found out about something through his grandfather. The young man laments with his hand on his head, complaining that his grandfather really has no composure to keep a secret. Sylvia is left completely clueless, but Lion asks her to wait just a bit longer and shares that he managed to bring all the ingredients. She is left totally in shock and asks if he really got the things, receiving a positive answer from the young man. He runs excitedly inside the mansion and asks her to wait, promising to prepare everything as fast as he possibly can. Lion also lets John know that he is fine and that he can go back to his chores normally. Leaving the assistant hesitant, John runs after him, shouting for him to at least use some medicine on the cuts and scratches scattered across his body. While listening to the young man's desperate shouts in the distance, Sylvia remains in silence, observing the scene thoughtfully. She reflects that most potions do not work on her due to being a witch, and remembers how Lion was always the most fragile member of the family. He was the grandson she protected the most, and seeing that fragile boy spend the night awake working at the forge and harvesting herbs touched her in an almost comical way. That situation made the housekeeper feel a tiny spark of expectation within herself. She takes a step forward on the garden stone path and murmurs quietly to herself about that unbelievable situation. The woman wonders if that boy would truly be capable of producing a potion of such an elevated level as promised. A few days pass, and Sylvia is received in the main office with the confirmation of her arrival at the meeting place. Patrick observes his sister's expression as she holds the vial and comments that the potion seems to have had a very positive effect on her. She smiles and reveals that her mind, exhausted for decades, has finally cleared. Shocked that the boy made something so effective in such little time, Sylvia accuses the patriarch of having helped in some way, but Patrick firmly denies it and says he did absolutely nothing. He points to the piles of paper and says he is far too busy preparing Lion's coming-of-age ceremony that had been cancelled. Sylvia realizes that if Lion made that incredible potion entirely by himself, that would actually create another type of massive problem. She looks at the vial on the wooden table and comments that the potion seems worthy of a true legendary hero. The patriarch explains that, by tradition, a hero is a being who emerges alongside the monsters to save the world before evil consumes it. He ponders that the personal lives of these heroes are never happy, as they face endless battles and deal with a constant emptiness and despair. Patrick continues saying that when peace finally returns, the heroes simply vanish as if they were nothing more than disposable tools. He clenches his hands tightly and adds that they disappear without leaving a single trace behind, exactly as if they had evaporated into thin air. The man reveals that the remaining companions and descendants tried to search for him everywhere, but never found even a single clue about him. He then poses a worrying question about what they should do if Lion is truly one of those legendary heroes destined for that end. He confesses with sadness that it was already far too painful to lose a battle companion in the past, and he does not want to go through that with his grandson. Upon hearing his words, Sylvia flashes a confident smile and declares that now is the perfect time for them to hide the boy very well. She solemnly announces that she is retiring from her duties, leaving the patriarch completely shocked by the sudden decision. Patrick stands up outraged and asks if it makes any sense for her to give up her own freedom just to keep Lion hidden. He says she should not want to be a subordinate to the family forever, but she interrupts him, calling him by his name before he can continue. With a firm look, she says that worrying about the well-being of a witch is the most useless and meaningless thing in the world. Sylvia takes a step forward while dark smoke rises around her, revealing that she has already memorized every single detail of their contract. She recites that the witch Sylvia cannot leave the family lands, but that she can live freely as a human within the territory. She explains that since the young master allowed her to live in a more human way in various aspects, she wants to do something for him. With a beautiful smile on her face, Sylvia states that she will gladly protect him up close, keeping her promise. In another room of the mansion, someone wonders in surprise if a new maid has truly just been hired. This is Lixil Astery, the second son of the family, who finds it very strange that a new maid has become exclusive to Lion. He is considered an unprecedented genius, the future heir to the family, and the youngest fourth circle mage in all of history. In many ways, he is the heir who looks most like the patriarch Patrick, using his young age as a powerful weapon. For someone rational like Lixil, the sudden appearance of this new maid at the mansion seemed like something extremely suspicious. He thinks it makes no sense for Sylvia to suddenly retire because of a potion, and that there is something very wrong with this replacement. Lixil then remembers the events of the previous night. When he had an important conversation in his own room, he had commented that Sylvia seemed quite cheerful and asked if she was really going to retire, and she confirmed she came to say goodbye. The housekeeper explained that the potion the young Master Lion had delivered to her worked unbelievable miracles on her health. At that moment, Lixil admitted that he still could not fully comprehend how that was possible to happen. She then suggested that, if he were so curious to know if it was true, he should go see his older brother personally. Sylvia recalled that he used to follow his brother everywhere as a child, but Lixil looks away and says that that was a long time ago. She laughed lightly and guaranteed that everything she said was the absolute truth. Leaving the youth thoughtful about his brother's situation, Sylvia added, saying that it would not be a bad idea for him to follow and observe the young Master Lion up close for at least an entire day. He thought that he could not stop her because he saw her looking so relieved, but he still finds it impossible that all of that is thanks to his silly brother Determined. He decides to go check everything with his own eyes. Remembering that they said Lion had been spending his time in the Mimir Forest nightfalls over the vast territory of the family, covering the dense and dark trees of the dangerous Mimir Forest. Upon entering the woods, Lixil complains that the place remains gloomy as always, and that there is not even a proper path to walk there. He questions what his brother finds so attractive there, since if he needed alchemy herbs, he could just send John to fetch them. Suddenly, a rhythmic and repetitive noise echoes through the forest, causing Lixil to stop and wonder what strange noise that is. He stops startled and peeks from behind the bushes, spotting his older brother crouching and focused on some strange task on the ground. Lixil recognizes his brother and is completely at a loss to understand what exactly he is doing alone out there in the middle of nowhere and in the dark. Looking closer, he is shocked to see Lion opening his entire mouth, about to take a giant bite out of something covered in dirt. Desperate, Lixil leaps from his hiding spot, wielding his magic wand, and shouts with all his might for his brother to stop immediately. He screams that Lion cannot eat something so filthy and launches a wind spell that snatches the sweet potato right out of his hand, startling his brother. An awkward silence settles over the clearing, while the two brothers stand frozen, staring at each other. Not knowing how to react to what happened, Lion drops to his knees on the ground, crying in despair upon seeing his delicious baked sweet potato, crushed and completely impossible to eat. The older brother stands up irritated, asking who is there and what the meaning of that is, but soon realizes that it is Lixil. Lion asks what he is doing there. While Lixil enters an internal panic for having ruined his plan to just observe him in secret, Lixil is left not knowing what to say while Lion approaches, imagining that his younger brother came all the way out there just to see him in the forest. Lion flinches, startled, thinking if the family prodigy came there to watch him closely. Even though that was not the actual case, Lixil apologizes for the sudden use of magic, but insists that he could not let him eat dirt, to which Lion answers that potatoes come from the earth. Lixil asks in a technical manner if he is referring to a starch-rich tuber, leaving Lion confused for never having heard such a description. Impressed, Lion asks if he really has never eaten a sweet potato in his life, causing the younger brother to look awkward at the question. The young man says outraged that he is missing out on the best part of life, while Lixil wonders if eating that is really something so important. Lion tells his brother to sit right there for a moment while he goes to harvest a few more potatoes, and the younger one accepts the instruction a bit hesitantly. Lion turns around with a big smile on his face and asks if his younger brother knows how to use fire-type magic. He asks if the boy could light a small campfire for them, and Lixil agrees, saying that doing that is not difficult at all. Shortly after, the young prodigy mage sits facing the bright campfire he just created in the middle of the dark clearing. Lion returns carrying several fresh sweet potatoes in his arms and asks if the campfire is ready, receiving confirmation from his brother. Without hesitating, Lion throws all the potatoes straight into the middle of the campfire's intense flames, leaving Lixil completely surprised by the action. Lion says to wait for them to cook and calms his brother, who feared seeing them burned, explaining that the thick skin protects the inside perfectly. The two brothers sit side by side on a fallen log while they wait in silence for the food to finish baking in the warm campfire. Lixil observes his brother out of the corner of his eye and breaks the silence of the cold night. Beginning to speak in a soft and reflective voice, Lion smiles and comments that stepping away from the daily routine and doing something completely different truly helps to clear a tired mind. He adds, saying that pushing oneself is good, but resting is crucial, causing the younger one to admit he understands what he means. Lion pulls the potatoes from the fire, catching the delicious aroma, and excitedly announces that they are ready so the two can eat. Lixil holds the hot food with his hands and takes a nice bite, being surprised by the incredibly sweet and comforting flavor of it. Lixil chews thoughtfully and is surprised to notice that the flavor of that warm food is very good. He admits surprised that it is truly very tasty, and Lion smiles, saying that they are known as banana sweet potatoes. Although their territory does not have a harsh winter, the forest at night gets cold and dark, sparking the desire to eat something warm. These are warm snacks, like baked potato and sweet fish bread. The perfect secrets for anyone to manage enduring the cold comfortably. Lion observes his younger brother eating with great appetite and notices that he has a truly massive appetite that night. He thinks that boys of that age eat like monsters and remembers that he also ate non-stop all day when he was a young student. Lixil suddenly looks to the side and is shocked to see the massive pile of empty skins he ended up accumulating without noticing. Lion says he is relieved to see that the food pleased his palate, leaving the boy quite embarrassed and stammering. The youngest admits he liked it, and Lion tells him to eat as much as he wants, as he knows he works very hard for the family in his place. Lion comments that while it is difficult to be the sick person, it is also very painful for the one who just has to stand around observing. The older brother smiles gently and guarantees he never considered that situation as a burden or a difficulty in his life. He also states with absolute certainty that he never blamed his brother for anything, but Lixil still hesitates in his own private thought. The boy confesses that he actually feels a bit envious of him, because Lion possesses the exact single important thing he lacks. He gestures nervously, saying he is not dissatisfied with his position and that he will keep working hard, drawing laughs from Lion. Looking at the youngest's worried reactions, the young master thinks fondly that his brother, at the end of the day, is just a child. He says that at his age it is normal to be selfish and suggests that if he gets tired of studying, he should just follow his heart every now and then. The older one sits right next to him on the log and places a hand on his shoulder, praising how hard he has worked up to that moment. Observing the starlit sky alongside his brother, Lixil thinks that Sylvia was right and that he is very happy to have gone to see Lion in the forest back in his room. Lion analyzes his notifications and excitedly notices that he has already managed to accumulate a total of 71,000 shillings. He notes that soon he will be able to use the shilling shop and recognizes that the effort of walking around creating the potion for Sylvia was worth it. The young man laughs, finding it a pity that his grandfather was rejected by Sylvia, while the old man shouts furiously in his mind, saying it was not quite like that. He celebrates having grown closer to Lixil and is glad that now he can relax a bit without the constant worry of being kicked out. Someone knocks lightly on his room door, and lying down comfortably, the young man says out loud for the person to enter the quarters. The door opens with a slight creak and a soft voice greets him, leaving the young master completely confused and surprised by the visit. The new maid introduces herself as Elvia and says she will look after him starting today, but Lion feels a strange and familiar sensation from her. He deduces there is some special motive behind this and thinks it makes sense for other races to exist there, since there are even dwarves in the fief. The young man says he looks forward to working with her, and Elvia bows, asking him to call her whenever he needs something. He displays a friendly smile and uses the moment to sincerely thank the new employee for her help. He comments cheerfully that, thanks to what happened, he feels that he and his younger brother finally managed to grow much closer. The young woman apologizes, saying she did not quite understand what he meant, but Lion laughs awkwardly and tells her not to worry. The young master then turns around in a hurry and asks if they can continue that conversation at another, more opportune time. He opens the mansion's exit door excitedly and shares that he has an appointment to go out together with Lixil today. Meanwhile, in the bustling commercial area of the village, people talk happily under the blue sky and sunny weather. Lixil walks thoughtfully through the streets, finding this entire situation extremely strange and intriguing, unable to understand the reason. The youngest wonders how his brother's physical stamina remains terrible, even with him climbing mountains every day and fainting from exhaustion. Lion runs tiredly behind him, begging for him to wait, while Lixil thinks that he urgently needs to be examined by a priest. He slows his pace to help his exhausted brother, fearing that Lion will get gravely ill before the family's important succession ceremony. He plans to find a discreet way to make him see a priest without drawing attention, knowing that the most guaranteed way for this is through volunteer work. He remembers that their doctrine encourages charity, which would allow them to approach the priests in a very natural and safe manner. Lion asks where they are going, and Lixil explains that young nobles draw a lot of attention, so they need something to use as a disguise. Lion suggests they look for clothes in a common fabric shop to disguise themselves, but the younger brother denies the suggestion immediately. Displaying a confident look, Lixil reveals that their destination is actually a shop specializing in tools and magical items. They arrive at the mysterious establishment, and the soft sound of the door chime announces the entry of the two young clients into the shopping venue. Lion is impressed by not knowing that place, and Lixil says that only people in the know go there, hoping they do not sell anything illegal. The youngest answers with doubt regarding the legality of the items. Leaving the older brother quite startled and hesitant at that response, Lion begins to examine the objects on the shelves of the magical tool shop and notices something curious that catches his attention significantly. He finds everything fascinating, but notes that the items look like children's toys, such as pens for cheating on tests and earrings to hear better. Lixil shares embarrassedly that he got to know the place during his academy days and guarantees that, despite the childish appearance, the items are quite useful. Suddenly, the owner of the establishment emerges from behind the counter, exclaiming loudly and confirming the absolute effectiveness of his products. The chubby and friendly man jokes, saying he sells everything except hair loss remedies, and highlights his top-selling tools. Lixil explains that they are looking for disguise tools, and the salesman excitedly says he has those items and asks them to follow him. The man points to the shelf full of potions and accessories and states that everything in that section serves as a disguise tool. He shows the cheapest items that change only simple details, like a bracelet that slims you down and insoles that increase your height. Next, he presents the luxury products that change even hair color, warning that they are very effective but also very expensive. He shows a hair clip called Unrecognizable Child, which alters hair color, eye color, and even creates temporary fake tattoos. The door chime rings cheerfully as they leave, while the shop owner says goodbye, shouting for them to return whenever they can. Lixil asks what he thought of the place, and Lion answers that he found the shop very fun and intends to return there with more time in the future. Lion notices that the salesman put some freebies in the bag, but Lixil thinks it must be nothing important, as the shop is not one to give gifts. However, looking closer at one of the additional objects inside the paper bag, Lion lets out a sound of surprise and curiosity. He realizes he got an artisan's repair kit as a freebie, an extremely valuable item that leaves him shocked for having come for free. Lixil says he has no use for those items and lets his brother keep everything, leaving Lion very thrilled with the generosity. Lion suggests they put on the disguises right away, and Lixil agrees, pointing to a quiet alley nearby where they can hide. They activate the transformation magic of the accessories, causing both of their hair and eye colors to begin changing instantly. Lion looks at himself with brown hair and blue eyes and is fascinated to see how the magical disguise looks incredibly perfect and natural. Lixil comments that that is already enough to walk around without being recognized, and the two agree to move forward quickly with the day's plan. Upon arriving at the destination, Lion is confused to see that they stopped in front of a watermill and asks why they went all the way there to volunteer. Lixil calms the older brother, explaining that wheat flour is one of the donation items and that they only stopped at the mill to pick it up. He shares that the mill also bakes and sells fresh bread, leaving Lion surprised for not knowing that mills did that. Besides grinding grains, Lixil thinks to himself that, besides the flour, there is another very important reason for having chosen to go specifically to that mill. They are warmly received by Nicholas, the owner of the mill, who says cheerfully that he was already waiting for the young men's arrival. Lixil plans to make friends with Nicholas, who is a devotee famous for his donations and contacts, to thus gain easy access to the temple. That way he can introduce Lion to a priest, and asks the mill owner if the flour grinding process went completely well. Nicholas celebrates touched, saying it had been a long time since he ground wheat of such quality and that the grains were perfect. The man asks the reason for needing so much flour, and Lixil answers that he was moved by seeing hungry children and decided to donate. Nicholas praises the young man's beautiful attitude and asks where he intends to deliver the donation, and Lixil says he is still thinking and asks for a tip. The merchant places a hand on his chin thoughtfully. While Lixil silently hopes in his mind for him to suggest the local temple, Nicholas suggests donating to the orphanage run by the temple, causing Lixil to celebrate with a lot of excitement while Lion understands nothing. Lion asks how many children live sheltered at the orphanage, and the mill owner answers that there are not many. Around 30 in total. Lion comments that he thought the temple had great facilities, but Nicholas explains that funding was cut and their financial situation worsened. He explains that, in the magic fief, the temple receives little attention from the noble mages, which makes it difficult for the orphanage to secure their support. Nicholas hopes that the young men can truly help the orphanage, but Lion interrupts his thoughts, asking for a moment of his time. Lion remembers that they bake bread at the mill and points out that just donating flour would give the priests a lot of work to prepare the food. He then strikes a pose and suggests in a very excited manner that they bake the bread themselves right there so the children can eat everything immediately. He argues that the orphanage might not have the other necessary ingredients, so receiving fresh, ready-made bread would be much better for them. Nicholas loves the great suggestion and says it is totally possible, bragging that his mill's bakery is famous for its delicious bread. Lixil grows thoughtful and realizes he was so focused on the plan for his brother that he did not even consider the actual needs of those children. He smiles upon noticing that Lion picked up on this important detail that he himself ignored. Admiring his older brother's great consideration and kindness, Nicholas and Lixil fully support the young man's great idea and celebrate together the decision to start baking the bread immediately. Under the bright afternoon sunlight, the group prepares excitedly to kick off the production of fresh bread at the village mill on the workbench. They separate a 1-star whole wheat flour and a high-quality 2-star olive oil. Lion evaluates the ingredients and thinks that the 2-star olive oil will impart an incredibly rich and wonderful flavor to the bread dough. Nicholas announces that they will make a classic whole wheat bread recipe, guaranteeing that the preparation is quite easy, tasty, and that the children will love it. With gloves ready and a lot of excitement, the baker instructs that first they should make just a smaller test batch to start. He explains that the first step is to knead the flour well, mixing the right amounts of salt, yeast, and fresh milk. Afterward, the dough must be placed in a container greased with olive oil to rest and rise properly in size. As soon as the dough doubles in size, they punch out the excess air from inside it and add crushed sunflower seeds into the mixture. Nicholas shapes the bread dough into a perfect round form on the floured table, finalizing the first stage of the preparation process. Lixil observes the ready doughs and thinks surprised that the process seems very simple and unbelievably easy compared to magic. Nicholas suddenly asks Lixil if he has already finished his part, causing the youth to be startled upon seeing that his older brother has already finished everything. Lixil says nervously that he will need more time to get used to it, and Nicholas agrees, saying he will bake the other doughs first. Shortly after, Nicholas opens the large wood-fired oven carefully to check the result of the first batch of bread. However, a sharp sound reveals that one of the breads ended up burning completely, turning into a black and hardened ball. Nicholas explains that putting too much dough causes it to burn like that, but comforts the boy, saying his other bread turned out great for a first time. Next, the mill owner excitedly announces that the breads prepared by Lion have also finished baking completely. They approach curiously to take a look and see how the older brother's batch turned out in the end. Upon opening the oven, a bright golden light emanates from the perfect breads, leaving everyone present totally marveled by the scene. The system reveals that Lion created a perfect whole wheat bread and that his cooking proficiency level rose to apprentice level 2. Nicholas stares at the tray full of bright golden breads and wonders, shocked how the young man managed to bake something so perfect. The baker asks in surprise how he managed to do that, but Lion smiles calmly and answers that he did nothing special. Lion thinks that he prepared the breads with affection for the children, wishing they could enjoy the tastiest food possible today. He explains that he made cuts on top to make it look prettier for the children, and Nicholas is left speechless upon hearing such consideration. Lixil praises his brother's talent, while Nicholas admits he misjudged the young men at first and notices both of their sincerity in helping the orphans. He asks if the youths would mind continuing to bake alone for a while, warning that there is a place where he needs to go urgently. Lion agrees without any issues, apologizing for having taken up much of his time, but the mill owner guarantees it was no trouble at all. The man runs hurriedly toward the exit, promising the brothers that he will return as fast as he can to help them. Lixil thinks he must have been very busy, but Lion reassures him, saying he should return soon and that they should keep baking. Determined, Lixil warns that he will do his best not to lose to his brother, and Lion laughs, saying that then he cannot make it easy either. Together, the two brothers keep preparing and baking batch after batch of bread, causing their cooking achievement progress to rise fast. They work in perfect harmony and fun, preparing dozens of warm and fragrant breads for charity. Suddenly, the mill owner returns and opens the doors, announcing loudly that he is back to join the young men. Lion is surprised to see him back so early, but ends up stammering upon noticing that something is different at the mill entrance. He notices startled that Nicholas did not return alone, but rather accompanied by a large crowd of local residents right behind him. A woman shares that Nicholas was very moved by their kindness, and that everyone decided to come help with the donation, even if it was just a little. She says her husband also wanted to come because he remembered their children, but since he was busy at the forge, she came to help in his place. Fearing having his disguise revealed, Lion quickly makes a discreet silence sign with a finger on his lips so she does not say anything more. Meanwhile, one of the village residents places a large and heavy bag of supplies directly onto the dirt floor of the path. The other residents also begin to quickly pile up various bottles of fresh milk, bags of grains, and several other generous donations. An incredibly strong woman surprises everyone by lifting a giant sack of groceries with her bare hands and tossing it to the ground with ease. They are shocked by her strength, commenting that she used to fight bears in her youth and that strength is a true divine blessing. Lixil smiles, impressed by the massive amount of donations, and Lion happily agrees, commenting that the people of that fief are very kind. Seeing everyone's unity, Lixil feels embarrassed for having focused only on his own interests instead of sincerely thinking of the orphanage's good. He observes his older brother smiling and thinks that, as soon as Lion fully recovers his weak health, things will change. The youngest concludes with total admiration in his look that his brother is truly destined to accomplish great feats in the future. A few hours later, they finally arrive at the orphanage run by the temple under the sunny sky of the family territory. Seeing the mountain of supplies being unloaded there, the director of the place cries with emotion and thanks them immensely for the generous help. She asks emotionally how she can repay so much kindness, but the young men say it is nothing, and that they are just very happy to be able to help. The children run curiously attracted by the delicious smell. While the director asks for them to first greet the visitors properly, they are also marveled to see the boxes of clean and nice clothes they received from the donation, celebrating happily with the news. The director suggests that they deliver the breads to the children themselves while she organizes the donations, and the brothers happily accept the task. Lion crouches down smiling, handing a fresh bread to each child, receiving excited thanks from all the little orphans there. While listening to the children's joyful celebration in the background, the young master suddenly turns intrigued upon noticing something unusual nearby. He spots from afar a lone and shy little boy standing under the shadow of a garden tree, observing the bread delivery with hesitation. Upon realizing he was noticed, the boy quickly turns his back and runs away from there. Leaving Lion intrigued by that aloof reaction, he approaches the director and asks who that boy was who just ran, and she answers worriedly that his name is Peter. She apologizes if he seemed rude and explains that because he is very young, he still does not know well how to react to gestures of kindness like that. Lion observes the little boy running far away on the horizon and murmurs thoughtfully about the aloof and distrustful behavior of that small orphan. A short time later, they finish the bread distribution, and the director comments that practically all the children have already been fed there. She notices that the young master is picking up a basket and preparing to walk, asking curiously where he intends to go at that moment. Lion turns around with a gentle smile on his face and answers simply that he is going after Peter, as he is the only one who has not received his bread yet. The director explains that Peter had his adoption canceled 3 times for being too shy, and since then, he rejects any kind of donation. Lion observes him from afar and thinks that the boy seems to be more or less the same age as the leather tanner's children in the village. Upon noticing the boy's curled-up legs, he realizes with concern that the little one is far too thin from not eating properly. Suddenly, Lion approaches slowly and calls him by his name in a very soft manner, causing the little boy to startle a bit at the voice. Lion sits on the grass near him, shares that he brought something very tasty, and asks if he does not want to take a bite, since it is the only piece left. He shows the warm bread and praises the savory and soft flavor of the fresh dough, trying to stir up little Peter's curiosity and appetite. However, Lion's plan works very well, and a loud stomach growl echoes in the silence of the garden, leaving the boy awkward. Lion smiles and comments that his stomach just proved that he is very hungry, causing Peter to lie down on the grass out of embarrassment. He thinks that if it were just a child's tantrum, he would play along, but realizes that Peter refuses food even while starving for another reason. The young man understands with sensitivity that the boy will need some time first to manage to trust him and open his heart. Meanwhile, the other volunteers say goodbye and thank them for the day of hard work, preparing to enter the temple mansion. Peter, who ended up falling asleep lying on the warm grass, opens his eyes slowly upon waking from a brief nap under the tree. He thinks relieved that all the visitors must have already left, grumbling angrily that those people are just hypocrites. He complains that volunteers do charity just for personal satisfaction and never return, but startles when Lion asks if he woke up. The boy screams startled, asking why he is still there, and Lion answers smiling that he slept so well that he did not want to wake him. He asks if Peter does not want to eat and says he is starving, offering half of his fresh bread in a very gentle manner to the boy. The boy turns his head pouting, making a sound of scorn, and Lion asks patiently if he is really going to refuse to eat. Facing the little one's silence, Lion sighs lightly and says, "That is fine then." Deciding to take a different approach to convince him, he holds the fluffy bread firmly and splits it in half with his hands, making a snapping sound that catches the little boy's startled attention. Lion takes a very large bite out of his part, and little Peter widens his eyes confused, asking what exactly he is doing there. He answers with his mouth full that he is eating the bread since Peter did not want it, as it would be a waste to throw it away, leaving the boy in a panic. The boy stammers desperate upon seeing the food vanishing quickly, and screams loud, extending his little hands toward the remaining piece of bread. He snatches the other half from Lion's hand, screaming nervously that he is going to eat it, making the young man laugh lightly at the success of his small trick. Upon taking the first bite, Peter is completely marveled by the flavor and admits with his eyes shining that the bread is far too delicious. He continues eating in a very fast and hungry manner, while Lion observes him in silence with an affectionate and satisfied look from the side. Peter turns shyly with his mouth full of crumbs, and Lion extends his hand to offer one more piece of warm bread to the little one. He smiles gently and says that that piece was actually his own portion, but he makes a point of handing it entirely over to him. Upon facing the young master's kind eyes, Peter thinks to himself how much that situation and that young man seem strange and unique. The boy reflects that that bread does not possess any rare or magical ingredient, and that it seems to be just a common and simple everyday recipe facing so much simplicity. The small orphan questions in his thoughts the real reason for that common bread having such a wonderful flavor. He remembers that charity visits are usually just empty theater displays by wealthy people who do not truly care about them. He recalls with sadness all the people who faked kindness but ended up returning him to the orphanage, claiming that he did not truly love them. The boy chews the bread, crying in silence, and thinks bitterly that adults are all liars who always end up breaking promises. Lion notices the sadness in his look and asks calmly if Peter knew an interesting fact about human behavior. He says that sad adults usually skip meals and regret it later, praising the boy for eating very well even while being upset. The young master smiles with affection and confesses that, when preparing that batch of bread early today, he hoped very much that someone would be happy eating it. He says he is very happy to see the little one savoring the food so much, leaving Peter quite emotional and touched by his affection. Lion asks amused if he is crying, and the little boy stammers bashfully, saying it is just because the bread is far too delicious. The young man asks, smiling, if that is truly the reason for his tears, and Peter shifts his gaze shyly, confirming yes with his head. Holding tight the remainder of his food, the little boy finally puts pride aside and whispers a sincere thank you to the youth. Lion extends his pinky finger and promises with a big smile that he will prepare many more delicious breads to bring to him on the next visit. Peter hesitates, surprised by the oath, but the young master encourages him, guaranteeing that he never broke a single promise in his entire life. He winks in a complicit way and asks for the boy to keep that oath well in his memory, guaranteeing that he will fulfill his word faithfully. The two hook their pinky fingers, sealing the pact, and Peter happily promises that next time he will make a point of eating 2 whole breads. Lion pats his head, joking that he should eat 3, and that he will have to make a lot of bread, causing the boy to grumble in a fun way. Far off in the mansion garden, the orphanage director observes the whole scene with her hands on her chest, and is deeply moved by the young man's attitude. She thinks with her eyes misty with emotion how long it had been since she last saw little Peter smile in such a pure, sincere, and genuine way. Lion invites Peter to go play with his friends. While the woman regrets having neglected their attention with the excuse of routine, she concludes admired that a truly good and sincere person like that young man deserves to receive all the best blessings from God. Under the vibrant colors of the sunset, the children wave happily, asking for them to return soon, and the brothers say goodbye, waving back. The orphanage director asks for them to wait and asks if they could stay a bit longer, as she does not want to let them go after such a beautiful charity. She reveals that she contacted the priest urgently and shares that he is coming personally today to pray for the local children. She suggests that the two receive a blessing prayer from the priest before leaving the brothers completely shocked by the opportunity. Lixil celebrates in thought for the success of the plan and answers in a polite way that they accept the invitation with much gratitude so as not to be rude. The director smiles satisfied with the response and gently invites them to enter the orphanage building while they await his arrival. While they enter, the sound of horse hooves running in a hurry on the road indicates that the temple priest is about to arrive there. Inside the carriage, High Priest Lisht adjusts his glasses in a thoughtful way while observing the landscape of the path through the window. Lixil shows himself concerned for his brother, since it is someone from the temple, and suggests postponing the meeting, but Lion happily agrees immediately. He stands up from the couch and explains that he just remembered something very important and urgent that he needs to settle back at the family mansion. Lion tells the youngest not to worry and to enjoy his time. Saying goodbye excitedly for it being the time of his daily baking training, Lixil thinks it was better this way, as Lion needs a holy prayer, and it would be bad if the cleric had ill will toward their family. He decides it is better to analyze the priest personally first, and greets him in a polished way as soon as he opens the door and enters the room. High Priest Licht introduces himself as a servant of God and wishes that divine grace always be with that so charitable anonymous benefactor. He shares that he found out through the director about the young man's desire to remain as an anonymous donor, and Lixil confirms that this information is right. Lixil notices that the cleric is young and thinks that, for having come from so far just to pray, he must not be an ordinary person within the temple. Licht thanks for the immense help the temple received, thanks to their charity. But Lixil answers humble that this is due to everyone's effort in the village. The youth confesses that the one who truly dedicated himself from the heart was his older brother, revealing that the idea of the breads came entirely from him. The cleric asks if he is referring to the brother who needed to return earlier, due to not feeling very well, and Lixil confirms sadly. He clenches his hands tightly and reveals that his brother has always had very fragile health since childhood and that he still suffers from a serious condition. Lixil confesses that he did not go there just for charity, but rather with the planned intention of bringing his sick brother to receive the cleric's help. Licht smiles in a friendly way and asks for him to calm down, sincerely lamenting that such a kind and charitable person suffers from a condition. The cleric reveals in a secret tone that he also needed to leave hidden without the temple's knowledge to be able to come to that orphanage today. Lixil notices the man's serious expression and wonders apprehensive if the cleric is refusing the treatment, unable to decipher what he thinks. However, Licht breaks the tense silence by suggesting that they meet again, exactly 3 days from that moment. He asks if the youth could return to the place at that same time, accompanied by his older brother, so they can perform the examination. At the next dawn in the grand Asteri family mansion, a desperate shout from Lixil calling for his older brother echoes loud through the corridors. He enters the lab fighting with his brother for spending the night awake with fragile health like that, but Lion says he could not sleep. Lion asks curious the reason for such a rush, and Lixil excitedly reveals that the temple priest accepted to examine his health condition closely. Lion is surprised to find out about the examination, and the youngest explains that the cleric wishes to help him due to feeling immense gratitude for the help to the orphanage. The young man thinks that he just has a fragile body and that his mana collapse problem has already vanished, not actually possessing any real illness. He reflects that he even gained physical vitality lately working in the woods, but concludes that that offer is very good and decides to accept the exam. Lion says in a calm way that he accepts the invitation, causing the younger brother to open a huge smile of happiness and ask excitedly if it is serious. Lixil comments that, curiously, the priest asked for the meeting to be held at dawn, leaving the older brother half surprised. 3 days later at the orphanage, Lion observes surprised a vial of high-quality holy water, admired that such a young priest creates that Lixil enters the quarters, accompanied by the cleric, and catches his older brother's attention, who quickly turns to greet the visitor. Lion makes a respectful bow greeting the priest, who gently returns wishing that divine blessings always be with both. With a calm and very welcoming face, Licht politely invites them so everyone sits comfortably before talking. Already seated in the room, Lion strikes up a conversation and says he has a great curiosity in his mind, receiving the cleric's permission to ask. He asks politely if there is some special reason for the meeting having been scheduled at dawn, causing the priest to sigh thoughtfully. Licht reveals in a mysterious way that he had a very striking dream with the two young men recently, leaving both extremely surprised. He explains that clerics with great holy power usually receive divine messages and revelations through dreams, known as prophetic. Lixil asks curious what kind of dream that was, and the high priest laughs lightly, answering in a modest way that it was nothing grand. He shares that he dreamed of the children sleeping in peace in a flowery field under the protection of the two brothers, whose appearance looked a bit different. The cleric says he woke up very happy with that dream, and because of that, wanted to meet them, admitting that he also needed to confirm a personal suspicion. He wanted to find out personally what kind of people they were to have appeared in his revelation, leaving Lixil tense while Lion smiles. The cleric analyzes them with attention and thinks that the younger brother is clearly a young mage, owner of a very refined posture and vocabulary. He suspects they belong to the Astri family and fears espionage, deciding that he will uncover the truth when examining the older brother's health. He asks if he can kick off the medical examination, and Lixil politely agrees, letting him know he will wait outside the quarters during the process. Licht approaches the young man seated in the armchair and announces he will begin the procedure, receiving the young master's confident consent. The high priest extends his hands covered by white gloves and begins to conjure a bright and intense holy healing magic over the young man. During the conjuration of the holy magic, Licht suddenly stops, startled upon noticing an extremely strange and unexpected reaction. He thinks confused that he applied the blessing in the correct way, but questions himself outraged why the youth's body shows no change. The cleric begins to break into a cold sweat from nervousness and wonders distressed if he ended up making some silly mistake during the healing process. Licht is left open-mouthed, unable to believe that, while Lion answers calmly with a tranquil face. The young master smiles from ear to ear and guarantees in a very joyful way that his body is already feeling incredibly better. Lion says in a gentle way that that amount of blessing is already enough for today, but the priest stammers nervous. Trying to contest, Licht reflects concerned that there are only 3 possible reasons for someone's body not to change at all with the blessing of a high priest. The reasons would be a superior mage rejecting the healing, the person's health already being perfectly flawless, or lastly, a tragic case. The last option would be the patient having been born with short life expectancy, but Lion interrupts him, thanking for the immediate well-being. Licht takes a firm stance and calls him brother, promising that if someday he needs his help in any difficult situation. Without hesitating, the high priest holds both hands of the young master with a lot of strength and determination, surprising the youth with the attitude he asks for Lion to go to the temple and say his name whenever he feels so much pain in his body that he cannot even sleep, leaving him confused. With a fire of determination in his eyes, he guarantees that he will help him in any way, and Lion accepts the promise, half startled. Lion sincerely thanks for the massive consideration, and the priest answers with gentleness that he will always be ready to receive him back. The young man walks back toward the exit, while Licht observes him walk away with a rather serious, thoughtful, and worried expression. Lion listens to the cleric's final blessing and scratches his head confused outside, without understanding why that situation left him so thoughtful. While the day advances under a beautiful bright rainbow in the sky, the image focuses again on the imposing castle of the prestigious Asteri family. Lixil celebrates for seeing his older brother with a much better energy, commenting that the stroll at dawn was very much worth it for both. Lion thinks that the holy magic was excellent, as it eliminated for good all the muscle pain and stiffness in the shoulders, caused by baking bread all night. He notices that Lixil's dark circles are deep and asks if the youngest is exhausted, but the boy forces a smile and says he is fine. Lixil says goodbye, saying he needs to perform his morning mana training, leaving the older brother completely shocked by the routine. Lion complains that he spent the entire night awake and warns that pushing oneself like this will end up doing a lot of harm to the youngest's health. Sylvia emerges with her usual dark aura and comments in a thoughtful way that the heir's training routine lately seems even more packed. Lion agrees, concerned about his brother's health, and she suggests talking to the patriarch about this when settling the coming-of-age ceremony. The housekeeper completes, saying that the patriarch Patrick also has been quite thoughtful lately, sparking a quick idea in Lion's mind. She then suggests that the young man pay a visit to his grandfather, bringing some kind of tasty sweet, making the young master agree, excited with the idea. Shortly after, the two meet in the spacious and clean castle kitchen to kick off the preparation of the special sweet recipe for the grandfather. Lion focuses totally on kneading and rolling out the fluffy dough on the wooden table, using a rolling pin with a lot of skill. He thanks for the excellent idea and thinks that cookies are ideal, but suddenly questions himself, curious if his grandfather actually likes sweets. She corrects him, reminding that her name there is Elvia, and guarantees that Patrick will eat anything that comes from his grandson, so he does not need to worry. The youth smiles from ear to ear and answers that since his grandfather is going to eat, he truly hopes he manages to savor and like the sweet a lot. In the middle of the recipe preparation, Lion lets out a loud exclamation of surprise upon remembering a very important detail that can improve the sweet. The disguised housekeeper observes him in a quite curious and attentive way, trying to predict what the young man is planning to do different there. He places some dried sweet potatoes on the work table, and Elvia asks, surprised, if he really plans to put that in the dough. She comments that it is a very unusual combination, but the young man answers confident that he hopes his grandfather takes a bite once and notices how delicious it is. He explains that he will use the potato cut very thin to give a natural sweetness to the cookies, allowing his grandfather to eat everything without guilt or burden. The young master smiles satisfied with the idea and excitedly announces that the next step of the special baking preparation is already ready to begin. Upon shaping the cookies into cute star, bear, and little bird formats, he thinks he must ask the blacksmith Mudu to make special cookie cutters later. He places the baking sheets full of decorated cookies inside the very hot castle oven so they begin to bake and brown perfectly. The young man celebrates excited upon removing them from the oven, and the system reveals that he successfully created special one-star banana and sweet potato cookies. Lion is surprised to see that the food gained vitality potion effects, while she praises him, saying he made almost the entire recipe by himself. She suggests in a friendly way that he try a cookie to test the final flavor of the recipe, and Lion accepts the invitation, very thrilled. Upon biting the sweet, he celebrates, saying that the flavor is superior to any chocolate cookie of his past life, leveling up in cooking. She explains that sweets help fight mental exhaustion and guarantees that his grandfather will love the mild and balanced flavor of that new recipe. He immensely thanks Elvia's valuable help in the kitchen, and she answers humble that she only did her duty, suggesting dividing the cookies into jars. Lion gently lets her know that he himself will take care of dividing the sweets and tells her to go rest, leaving the disguised housekeeper a bit surprised. The young man smiles in a complicit way and reveals with an excited look that he still needs to prepare a few more important things in the kitchen before finishing. He turns his back and discreetly accesses his virtual game system, taking care not to open the inventory in front of the new maid. For having reached level 3 of cooking, new recipes appeared, and Lion decides to prepare a special drink to create a perfect combination. He analyzes his options on the bright holographic screen and excitedly selects the special recipe called Training Support Drink. To make, Lion analyzes the recipe for the Training Support Drink and thinks that both his grandfather and Lixil will like it a lot. He thinks that the ingredients look familiar, but decides not to worry about that and focus on making a perfect combination for the cookies. Lion smells an orange very close up and celebrates upon noticing that all the fruits he is going to use are extremely fresh. With everything ready on the counter and wearing his apron, the young master prepares, excited to kick off the recipe. He washes the fruits well, cuts each into thin slices, and places the low-grade health potion to simmer on low heat. As soon as the fruits cook a little, the young man adds the star anise and waits until the citrus flavor is fully extracted. When he feels the sweet aroma rise through the kitchen, he pours all the hot liquid through a strainer to filter the juice. After straining the red mixture into a glass, Lion adds a drop of rosemary oil to give the final touch of freshness. The Training Support Drink gets ready, and Lion notices that it reminds a lot of the traditional mulled wine recipe. Upon tasting the result, he finds the flavor wonderful and decides to combine the glass of the drink with the cookies he just baked. The system announces the creation of Lion's special beverage set, which helps reduce fatigue and improves training efficiency. He unlocks an unprecedented achievement for creating his first complete meal and still earns 3,000 shillings as a system reward. Satisfied with the final result of his baking work, Lion removes the apron and leaves it on the kitchen counter. With the bright tray of sweets and drink in hands, the young master decides that it is the ideal time to go pay a visit to his grandfather. Patrick is seated in his office when he hears Lion's voice, asking if he is very busy at that moment. The patriarch asks what he is carrying and questions outraged if the mansion servants are not even serving things to his grandson. Lion laughs at the situation and explains that it is not quite like that, as he himself wanted to bring everything personally to make a pleasant surprise. He places the tray on the table and explains that he made the drink using an old potion and baked cookies so they could eat together. Surprised by the dedication, Patrick asks if he really prepared all of that alone, and Lion confirms in a simple manner. The young master smiles and says he thought it would be a very fun way to show his small cooking achievements to his grandfather. The young man gently asks for him to try the sweet, and the elderly man stares in silence at the cute cookie in a teddy bear format. Patrick takes a bite of the cookie and is completely in shock upon noticing that the sweet simply melts in a soft way in the mouth. The patriarch feels the mild aroma of the sweet potato spread and loves the sugar balance that brings an incredible feeling of well-being. The system warns that Lion's proficiency in cooking rose a level for making someone savor his food with so much relish. Patrick shifts his tone suddenly and asks for his grandson to speak up once and for all, leaving Lion quite confused by that reaction. The grandfather states that he would not come all the way there just to deliver food and tells him to reveal his business, making the boy laugh awkwardly for being caught. Lion looks at the tray and comments shyly that he heard that his coming-of-age ceremony should be held very soon. The young man suggests giving a well-deserved rest to Lixil until the big day, and the elderly man asks the reason for that so sudden request. He explains that everyone is going to participate in the party, but thinks that his younger brother's daily training schedule is far too exhausting. Lion asks to reduce the pace of the youngest's classes so that the whole family participates healthy in the event, leaving the grandfather reflective. The patriarch tries to maintain his firm pose, but inside he is emotional seeing how his grandson became an incredibly thoughtful young man. The elderly man thinks that the two brothers could dispute the clan's leadership, but is very proud to see that they developed this affection. Patrick agrees and says he will release the youngest, making Lion thank him radiant, although the grandfather asks if that is his only request. Patrick insists on knowing if his grandson does not wish to ask for anything more for his own coming-of-age ceremony, leaving the youth confused. Lion guarantees immediately that he needs nothing more, and the grandfather wonders whom he took after for not showing greed with the gift. All because the role of the coming-of-age event goes far beyond a simple traditional ritual for the Empire's youths. Securing any extravagant gift desired by the youth was the most elegant way the nobles used to flaunt their wealth. Upon seeing his grandson refuse any gift, the elderly man is intrigued by what that truly means behind all this modesty. Patrick presumes in his mind that Lion actually wants his grandfather himself to choose a truly spectacular gift on his own. Feeling the terrifying pressure that suddenly emanates from his grandfather, Lion says awkwardly that he is going to head out and says goodbye quickly. As soon as the office door closes, the patriarch lets out a thoughtful murmur while savoring his cup of hot drink. He rests his chin and begins to seriously plan what he must do to secure the best coming-of-age gift possible. Meanwhile, Lion walks calmly back through the palace corridors, relieved to have resolved his brother's matter. In his own room, Lixil is surrounded by piles of documents and looks quite tired with the entire load of duties on the table. Suddenly, Lion flings the door open, shouting by the youngest's nickname, startling the boy and making several sheets fly through the air. The older brother laughs at the situation and jokes, saying he had no idea that the youngest was so messy in his day-to-day. Lixil gets extremely embarrassed with the messy room and confesses that he never wanted his brother to see him in that state. Upon being questioned about the reason for the visit, Lion smiles and shares that he prepared a special snack to help relieve his brother's fatigue. The two settle on the living room sofa, and the young mage bites the teddy bear cookie, curious to try his older brother's recipe. The youngest's eyes shine with surprise instantly, and he praises the sweet, finding the flavor absolutely spectacular. Lixil praises his older brother's manual skill and comments that he had already noticed his talent when he made the temple breads. Lion shares that he talked to their grandfather to reduce his tasks and tells the youngest to rest a bit until the day of the coming-of-age ceremony. He calms the boy, saying he already secured the patriarch's permission, as he noticed that his brother looked totally exhausted. Very touched by his older brother's care, Lixil smiles in a docile way and thanks immensely for all that affection. Lixil reveals that his exhaustion was not because of studies, making Lion think immediately that the youngest would be receiving love letters. While Lion thinks if the youngest already has interest in girls, Lixil clarifies that the real reason is his brother's own ceremony. The young master lets out a relieved sigh upon understanding that his brother was referring to the clan's important coming-of-age ritual. This traditional ritual is known as the Library Labyrinth, a magical trial that guides the participant to the ideal spell for him. The youngest explains that, although it is easy for those who follow magical guidance, the labyrinth hides a special item at the end of its path. Thinking that the youngest is just concerned about the fact that he has no mana, Lion tries to reassure him, saying that the ritual is just formality. However, Lixil gets quite tense and explains that his big concern is, actually, because of the clothes he will have to wear. Lion makes a face of complete astonishment upon hearing about clothes and asks intrigued what would be wrong with the event's wardrobe. Lixil asks if his brother has already seen the official outfit that their grandfather prepared especially for the big day, and Lion answers no. The youngest slams a sheet with the rough sketch of the outfit design on the table and dramatically reveals that their grandfather has a big weakness. He confesses that the elderly man has no sense of style, and Lion enters total despair upon seeing the bizarre and colorful design of the clothing. The young master states shocked that he cannot wear that under any circumstances, and Lixil agrees that it would be a total humiliation before everyone. They enter a panic, not understanding how the patriarch dressed well before, discovering that Sylvia was the one who blocked his bad fashion ideas. Lion mentally thanks Sylvia for saving them and decides that he will find a solution so that the whole family wears elegant and matching outfits. Using his disguise hood, Lion pays a visit to Leah and is received with a lot of joy and excitement by the local children. He greets the little ones affectionately and offers a package of cute cookies that he himself prepared with a lot of care for the visit. While the little ones happily savor the precious sweets, Leah thanks for the gift and asks curiously what brought the young man there. Lion reveals that he needs a special favor and mentions the skilled tailor who worked as a volunteer at the orphanage some time ago. He asks if she could introduce him to this tailor, leaving the woman quite surprised and intrigued by the sudden request. The young man explains that he observed the man's work at the orphanage and was very impressed upon seeing his incredible sewing techniques. He remembers how the professional could adjust clothes perfectly for the children and create beautiful outfits using only scraps. The young master explains that he very much needs someone with that talent, and Leah answers that it is possible to help, but makes a small caveat. Lion asks if there is some hitch with the man, and she says in a mysterious way that the young man will understand everything very well as soon as he arrives at the place. Following Leah's instructions, the young master walks through a desolate place full of debris until spotting an old wooden construction. He stops before the entrance and stares at an old and quite dusty sign, questioning himself if he had really arrived at the correct address. Suddenly, the broken sign detaches and plunges to the ground, making a loud noise, leaving the young man even more apprehensive about the situation. Upon opening the door, Lion runs into a dark corridor full of mannequins and finds it very strange that someone so talented works there. He politely calls for someone at the place and almost gets a fright when a figure emerges silently in the shadows, giving him the welcome. The man reveals himself under a bright light and asks in a super dramatic way if he is a client, tearing a startled scream from the young man. The tailor analyzes the visitor and asks surprised if he is not the boy he met at the orphanage, despite the different color of hair and eyes. Lion apologizes for not telling before and confesses that he is the Asteri heir, but that he was disguised that day for some reasons. The man smiles understanding and says that everything is fine, guaranteeing that he perfectly understands that a young noble must have his own reasons. Next, he asks what would bring such an important noble to his humble studio, and Lion answers that he is in search of a good tailor. The man gets extremely surprised and comments that a prestigious family like his should have no need for his services. He soon recovers from the shock and invites the young master to enter and sit comfortably so they can talk better. Upon entering, Lion spots grand awards on a dusty shelf and recognizes a very important high-fashion trophy of the empire. The host offers a seat and says he will prepare some tea, while Lion suggests dividing some cookies that he brought along. Upon serving the hot liquid in cracked cups, the man apologizes for the precarious situation of the place, but the youth says he does not mind. Lion offers the cookies, saying he prepared them with his own hands, leaving the tailor drop-jawed with the revelation. The man takes a cute teddy bear sweet and remembers that the young man had also made the incredible breads donated to the orphanage some time ago. Curious to find out if the flavor of the sweets is as good as that of the breads, he willingly accepts and takes a generous bite of the cookie. The man lets out a loud exclamation of pleasure and is fascinated with the perfect crispness of the sweet, finding the flavor simply formidable. He feels the crunchy texture melt instantly in his mouth and compares the beginning of the flavor to the purity of an innocent young boy. Shortly after, the wonderful flavor combination transforms in an overwhelming way in his mind into something totally different. The tailor fantasizes the story of a crown prince who falls in love with a peasant girl, feeling the flavor run in his heart like first love. He brings his hand to his chest in an extremely theatrical way and thinks that just classifying that delight as tasty would be far too little for it. Emotional, the man screams with his eyes wide, saying that that simple cookie is a true work of art. Andrew reflects in silence that the young man is full of mysterious contrasts, while Lion gets relieved upon seeing that the man liked the sweets. The tailor dries his tears, emotional, and thanks for the delicious snack, while the young master smiles and asks if the flavor was good. The man guarantees that he almost cried with joy, and states with enthusiasm that trying that sweet filled him with endless inspiration. Andri says that in gratitude for the visit and the wonderful food, he will answer any question with total honesty and without secrets. The tailor presumes that Lion wants him to make his coming-of-age clothes and confirms immediately that he has total capacity to perform the work. He guarantees that he knows how to design patterns, cut fabrics, and embroider like no one, but hesitates a bit and says there is a big problem in that Andri fears that Lion will become a laughingstock among the nobles when wearing clothes made by him, leaving the young man quite intrigued and asking the reason for that. The man reveals with sadness that he is an illegitimate son of a noble family, making Lion understand the silly prejudice he suffers in the empire. Lion hears about how the nobles boycotted him due to prejudice and thinks that he does not give a darn about the opinion of others, especially privileged people like those the tailor suggests lying about the outfit's creator. But Lion interrupts him and asks to see first some clothes that he has already crafted in the studio. Andri warns that only commoners' clothes remained in his stock, but the boy says it does not matter, as he just wants to evaluate the quality of his sewing. The tailor pulls a large gray curtain to reveal his old creations, leaving the young heir completely impressed with the scene. Andri shares that those are the simple pieces he sells to the neighbors, but the youth is left jaw-dropped upon noticing that the finish is perfect. Several system screens appear before Lion, revealing that the common garments have a 2-star rating due to the quality of the work. While the tailor comments sad about his simple reality, the young master continues marveled, looking at the perfection of each piece there. Lion realizes that if the man managed to create 2-star outfits using such simple fabrics, it means his skills border on perfection. He imagines marveled the absurd level of clothing that the man would be capable of creating if he received rare and top-quality fabrics. With firmness, Lion calls the tailor and declares with enthusiasm that he very much wishes to wear outfits signed by Andri himself at his special event. The man worries about the boy's reputation, but Lion guarantees that no one will dare say anything and just asks for him to confirm if he accepts the challenge. The young master raises 3 fingers and explains with conviction that he will need exactly 3 complete outfits ready by the day of the ceremony. Andri swallows hard facing that bold proposal and listens to the boy's direct question. If he really feels capable of doing that, Lion guarantees that he will assume all responsibility and tells the man to focus only on having ambition to accept such a grand work like that. The tailor trembles with emotion upon thinking of the chance to focus only on his talent and realizes that no tailor would refuse such a wonderful offer. He accepts the challenge with enthusiasm and asks for the boy to give the orders, making Lion smile satisfied upon seeing that he made the right decision. Andri pulls out a quill pen excited and asks hurried what the details are and what exact type of clothes the young master is going to want to order. Lion describes his demands for the family clothes, and the man notes everything, trying to translate the young heir's complex style ideas. Suddenly, the tailor panics upon realizing that the patriarch Patrick himself will wear his clothes and asks desperate if the boy is sure of that. The youth repeats with serenity that the disdain of the other nobles has nothing to do with his family and that he does not care about those intrigues. Andri calms down and agrees that no one in the empire would have the audacity to speak ill of the prestigious Astri family, which rivals even royalty. The young master confirms smiling, and the tailor focuses all his attention on the design table to kick off the sketches of the clothes he will make. With a look full of determination, Andri raises the quill pen and promises from the heart that he will give his absolute best to craft everything. The man says he already has the perfect design in mind and asks about the fabric, making Lion pull from the inventory a large book to help him. Lion reveals that he brought the family fabric catalog, and the tailor almost falls backward upon seeing the legendary book that is every tailor's dream. Emotional, the man says he could die happy just looking at that rarity and asks with trembling hands if he has permission to open it. Lion permits immediately that he examine the book with calm, and the tailor rests his hand on the golden leather cover to begin leafing through. As soon as Andri opens the catalog pages, a magical and golden light glints intensely from inside the book, leaving the man breathless. The book presents legendary fabrics of the continent, like elf hair, which is extremely rare for being spun only by a few elves. It also shows fairy breath, a precious fabric manufactured by mages, leaving the tailor in shock for seeing that they in fact exist. The boy asks if he liked any material, and the tailor answers that the real problem is not having any fabric there that he does not love. Suddenly, the man interrupts the pages quickly and stands paralyzed with his eyes wide upon running into a specific sample in the book. Lion approaches curious to see the material, and Andri recalls that, in the past, a young lady of the high nobility loved to wear that same fabric. He explains that it was impossible to find such material in the common sewing market and laments that there is no information about it written there. The young heir rests his hand on his chin and resolves to read in detail the system description to unravel that blue fabric's properties. The system reveals that the fabric is called Unconditional Love of the Archmage, making the boy suspect if the material was created by his grandfather himself. Lion remembers that Andri mentioned a young woman using the fabric and, linking the dots with the description, begins to deduce her mysterious identity. He decides to use that special fabric for the matching outfits and asks if it is possible to craft them. Receiving a very positive response, Andri prepares, excited to take Lion's measurements when, suddenly, they hear loud knocks coming from behind the studio door. A known voice calls for the older brother, letting him know he delayed a bit gathering some necessary supplies for the tailoring work. Lion gets confused upon hearing talk of supplies, and the person outside comments in a tone of doubt that things seem quite noisy on the street. Lion and Andri get startled upon hearing Lixel order outside for them to bring all the things immediately inside the shop. Upon opening the door, they run into a line of carriages packed with rare fabrics and servants, unloading everything there on the deserted street. Lixel appears and comments, smiling, that he heard rumors that his older brother was eyeing a specific tailor for the ceremony, Zobai. Youngest explains that since it is Lion's single and special coming-of-age ceremony, he would spare no effort to help him with that. With a very noble pose, the young mage concludes, saying that that level of luxurious support was the minimum he could offer his brother. Lion laughs awkwardly at Lixel's extravagance and asks if Andri prefers to use his own old tools. But the man says no. The tailor begs, excited to switch absolutely all his old tools for the new and luxurious ones that just arrived. After the grand delivery, Andri thanks for the young master's patience during the measurement process of his new gala clothes. The tailor promises from the heart that he will do his absolute best to create a true masterpiece, and the boy asks for him to go easy. Next, Lion smiles in a friendly way and comments that he would like to ask one more small sewing favor of the talented professional. He asks if Andri could teach him some sewing techniques, leaving the tailor and Lixel completely in shock with the idea. The tailor tries to refuse, saying that beginners get hurt a lot with needles and machines, but the youth guarantees he does not mind that. The youth calms the professional, explaining that he only wants to have a basic notion of sewing, and Andri asks, curious, what would be the real reason Lion thinks that. To truly value the tailor's hard work on his outfits, he needs first to understand the techniques the man will use. Very moved by the noble client's consideration, Andri agrees, emotional, that each sewing stitch and pattern cut carries an intention, moved by Lion's nobility of spirit. The tailor places his hand on his chest and promises that he will teach everything he knows without hiding anything from him. Andri steps away to take Lixel's measurements and tells Lion to feel free to explore and test all the new tools in the studio. Time advances quickly as the sun begins to set on the horizon, bathing the fief constructions with a beautiful orange shade. Alone in the studio, the young master walks among the sewing mannequins and thinks how the tailoring art is incredible to observe close up. He analyzes a pants pattern used by the tailor and wonders, shocked, how the man could make such incredible clothes with bad materials. Curious to test what he just learned, Lion holds the piece of fabric and asks himself, excited, if he should try to sew a bit now. As he still has not learned the basic techniques and does not have the fundamentals, he decides that the ideal to start practicing is to do manual sewing. He remembers he has the artisan's repair kit stored, a very useful item he won as a freebie on his last visit to the fief's magic shop. The young master smiles in a mischievous way and thinks that there would be no better opportunity than that to finally test the special sewing kit. Lion holds the metal needle and lets out an exclamation of surprise upon noticing that the magical tool changes shape instantly in his hand. He gets fascinated upon realizing that the needle passes the thread automatically and takes on a brand new look whenever it is used. Seated before the work table, bathed by the twilight light, the youth prepares, concentrated, to give his first stitches in sewing. He focuses totally his attention on the needle and begins to sew the fabric manually with quite care under the soft light that enters through the window. The youth opens a slight surprised smile upon realizing that the manual sewing activity is actually much more fun than he imagined. Although he thought it would be annoying to work with something so small, Lion feels calm and notices that his stitches are increasingly fast and firm. To his surprise, bright guidelines appear over the fabric, facilitating the work, and he deduces that that is another incredible power of the magic kit, finding everything very easy. Lion advances fast, and the system reveals that the completion rate of the cotton pants pattern has already reached 80%. Lion gets startled upon hearing Lixil knock on the office door, asking if he has already finished and apologizing for interrupting his concentration. The youngest says he did not want to disrupt his brother's focus, while Andrew cries with emotion when analyzing the youth's flawless beginner sewing progress. The tailor evaluates the cotton pants in detail and exclaims, surprised that, despite some crooked stitches, the final result is excellent. Suddenly, the tailor begins to scream and run from side to side like crazy, leaving the two Asteri brothers completely confused with the scene. He screams that manual sewing is the foundation of high fashion and confesses that he almost forgot this principle for working only with prefabricated clothes. While Andrew continues screaming excited in his own world of creative ideas, Lion sighs laughing upon seeing that the tailor got too thrilled. The older brother suggests that they return to the mansion for now, and Lixil agrees that it is a good idea to leave once and for all. The younger brother explains in a serious tone that they cannot delay under any circumstances, as they have an official dinner scheduled with the patriarch Patrick. At the mansion, the butler enters the office and respectfully lets the patriarch know that the two young masters have already arrived and await him in the hall. Concentrated on his paperwork at the illuminated table, Patrick stores his quill pen and answers calmly that he has already understood the butler's message. The patriarch stands up and begins to walk through the imposing and decorated corridors of the Gothic castle toward the clan's luxurious dining hall. The butler comments that it is quite rare to see the three dining together at the table, and the patriarch agrees, saying that moments like this in family are necessary. The elderly man vents that he does not work all the time out of pleasure, but rather because that is the only efficient way he possesses to protect his beloved grandsons. He complains that the nobles of the imperial court continue demanding too much from him, even after 50 years from the end of the terrible war against the demons. Patrick says he only wanted to spend more time with his grandsons in his final years, but the butler reminds laughing that elite mages live almost as long as elves. Upon approaching the large double doors of the hall, the patriarch declares with authority that he could not absent himself now that his heirs have gathered. The elderly man reflects if his heart softened due to advanced age, or if it was due to the warm affection that his grandson Lion demonstrated recently. Upon seeing his two grandsons waiting at the decorated table, Patrick thinks that he only wants to live in peace alongside the greatest treasures that his late daughter left him. Lion warmly greets his grandfather at the entrance, while Patrick thinks determined that he cannot let anyone discover his grandson's true potential. Upon seeing the lavish and exaggerated banquet on the table, the young master thinks startled that preparing all of that for a simple dinner was a big exaggeration. Lixil joyfully explains that he made a special request to the head chef, since it had been a long time since the whole family last gathered together to dine. Lion remembers that in the past he used to skip meals or eat flavorless porridge, while his grandfather dined almost always at the imperial palace. He realizes that due to their absence at the mansion, the youngest Lixil probably spent nights dining alone at that massive empty table. The older brother discreetly observes him with affection and thinks that the youngest must have felt incredibly lonely during all this time. Lion comments smiling that they should have dinner nights like that with more frequency, leaving the younger brother quite touched and wordless. In turn, Lixil looks at Lion and mistakenly thinks that the older brother is the one who must have endured much loneliness silently for all these years. Lixil squeezes his utensils tightly and decides that he will ask the patriarch to plan more moments and leisure dinners so they stay together, while one wishes to protect the other from their loneliness. The two brothers exchange looks full of affection and deep complicity at the dinner table. Patrick finally takes his seat at the head of the dinner table, under the attentive look of the employees and his beloved grandsons. The patriarch gives official start to the banquet, inviting everyone to eat, and the grandsons answer in unison in a well-polite way. Lion and his family begin to savor the delicious roast meat dishes that were specially prepared by the mansion's chef. Patrick breaks the silence, asking about the progress of Lixil's tasks, and the boy answers that he is taking care of everything without any failure. Silence returns to reign in the room while they continue eating, creating a somewhat cold and formal atmosphere among the three family members. Patrick chews thoughtfully and complains to himself that his heir grandson did not ask about his health or what type of gift he would like to win at the party. Noticing the tense mood and wanting to cheer up his younger brother, Lion decides to take the initiative and calls his grandfather to pull a totally new subject. He asks in a direct way if his grandfather ever produced some type of fabric for their mother, leaving the patriarch and Lixil completely startled. Feigning ignorance, the patriarch takes a quick sip of wine and answers in a somewhat evasive way that he has not the slightest idea what his grandson is talking about. Upon noticing his grandfather's nervous reaction and cold sweat, Lion concludes that talking about their late mother indeed leaves the patriarch very uncomfortable. He continues cutting the meat and shares that he met with a tailor today and ended up finding a very unique and rare fabric stored in the clan mansion. Lion turns to Lixil and asks if he remembers that beautiful bright fabric he brought before, and the youngest confirms that he recalls it well. The young man repeats Tailor Andry's words about how a young lady of the high nobility loved that shimmering fabric in the past. He deduces out loud that the said mysterious young lady was their mother, since the legendary fabric roll was stored right in the family warehouse. The patriarch grows thoughtful with eyes low and only murmurs that he understands, while Lion notices the deep seriousness that the subject evoked. The young man thinks that talking about their late mother was probably the greatest taboo that the whole family tried to avoid at all costs in the day-to-day, but he knows that pretending that the subject does not exist will not bring real comfort, as grief wounds only heal when everyone talks openly. Decided to bring the family closer, the young man resolves to use the matching clothes project as an excuse to open the conversations and heal their relationship. Patrick sighs and breaks the silence, sincerely confirming that Lion is absolutely correct in his suspicions regarding the fabric's origin. The patriarch reveals that he himself was the one responsible for manufacturing that legendary fabric with his own magical hands. Leaving the grandson shocked, Lion asks, surprised if his grandfather really crafted the material alone, and questions what would have been the true reason to do that. The elderly man answers in a simple way that there is no big secret, because as a father it was only natural that he worried about his daughter's safety. He recalls the constant fear of his daughter getting hurt, or the cold weather harming her skin, so he wove the wool with maximum protection spells. The patriarch looks with melancholy and confesses, moved that he never imagined that the protective fabric he made for his daughter still existed nowadays. Lixil lowers his head emotional upon hearing about the magical piece and thinks of the immense meaning of wearing a fabric made with so much love for his mother. Patrick notices Lixil's trembling hands and realizes with guilt that his deep pain from grief ended up leaving his two grandsons. Very helpless Lion joyfully shares that he will use the fabric in the ceremony outfits and asks if there is enough, receiving a confident guarantee that nothing will lack. Patrick gets a start when his grandson asks in a casual way what day he would be free to receive the tailor's visit for the measurements. The patriarch thinks that the matching clothing would be only for the brothers, but Lion corrects him laughing and says that his grandfather will also have to wear an identical outfit. Lixil suggests that they invite the tailor to go to the mansion to facilitate his grandfather's packed schedule, and Lion immediately loves the youngest's excellent idea. Patrick fakes a cough and fakes yielding awkwardly, authorizing his grandson to lead the entire tailoring project as he sees best for the big party. Relieved to secure permission and prevent his grandfather from ruining the party, look with his lack of style, Lion celebrates his plan's success. With everything resolved at the table and family harmony restored, the young man happily thinks that now he can focus only on his event's preparations. From that marking dinner on, the preparations for the big coming-of-age event of the Asteri brothers advanced without any unexpected issue or delay. Thanks to talented tailor Andry's frequent visits to the mansion, the family's stunning gala clothes were taking shape with perfection. All the luxurious and imposing decoration of the Asteri castle was also carried out by the maids and servants exactly within the planned schedule, with the unrestricted and overprotective support of his grandfather, Patrick, and his brother. Lixil, Lion realizes laughing that he ended up left with absolutely nothing to do. However, the young master does not get bothered by the forced idleness and mentally thanks for having gained this valuable opportunity in his daily routine. He takes advantage of all this free time to focus on learning to sew, but suddenly feels that there is something strange happening in the process. Lion continues passing the needle with speed in the fabric and thinks that, with all this frantic practice, he already should have leveled up in sewing. Suddenly, the system screen brightens with the warning that the new sewing talent was unlocked, but the boy gets frustrated for not feeling any change. He analyzes the finalized cotton clothing and wonders, irritated why the new skill seems so weak in comparison to his blacksmith talent. The young master narrows his eyes and begins to formulate a quite terrifying hypothesis regarding his true potential in that game world. He enters total panic upon, thinking if in reality he has no natural talent for the art of sewing, and if everything he did was in vain, Lion shakes his head to dismiss the bad thoughts and reflects that if he truly lacked talent for something, that something would be cooking. He compares sewing with cooking and alchemy, questioning himself if the difference lies in the mentors or in the type of tools he uses in the recipes. Without managing to reach any logical conclusion regarding the working of his skills, the young man pulls his hair in a moment of pure frustration. At this moment, Elvia enters the office, bringing the news that Tailor Andri has just arrived at the Astri mansion to see him. Lion excitedly asks if the clothes finally got ready, and the maid confirms yes, but warns that the tailor's expression looked strange. The young master gets intrigued upon hearing about the man's physiognomy, and she explains with seriousness that the visitor's behavior was quite unusual. Elvia comments in a worried tone that it looked like something very terrible or totally out of the plan had happened to the gala order. She completes saying that she preferred to take him first to the visiting room out of precaution, and the young man walks hurried there to resolve the situation, with a somewhat apprehensive heart. The young master rests his hand on the large golden wooden door and opens it quickly to uncover the problem. As soon as he enters the visiting room, the youth stays completely paralyzed and breathless before the spectacular brightness that glints before his eyes. He stares at the mannequins dressed with the magnificent gala outfits and wonders, shocked if that visiting room suddenly turned into high tailoring. The boy wonders, surprised how the man brought all those tools alone, and notices that there is nothing wrong with the stunning clothes. Lion greets the professional warmly, and the tailor smiles, relieved to see that the young master finally arrived to meet him. The man displays the magnificent dark suit made to measure for the air and suggests with excitement that the boy try the clothing immediately. Lion wears the elegant white jacket and adjusts the collar, admiring the beautiful and detailed golden embroideries that decorate his outfit's sleeves. He looks at himself in the mirror and celebrates, saying that the result turned out incredible. While the system reveals that the suit reached the high 3-star category, Lion notices Andri's worried physiognomy and asks if there is something wrong with the work, since the tailor seems dissatisfied with the suit. The system alerts that the gala outfit is excellent, but that it still cannot be used because some crucial element lacks to relieve the tailor's agony. Lion observes himself attentively before the mirror and suddenly lets out an exclamation out loud upon finally deciphering what is missing in the clothing. The youth points to the collar, saying he feels his neck region very empty, making the tailor vibrate with joy to see that he noticed. Andri agrees and explains that essential accessories lack on the neck to give an elegant focal point to the outfit, like a tie or a pocket square. The youth realizes he needs to give attention to these small style details and begins to reason regarding what would be the ideal accessory for the family. He plans for grandfather Patrick to wear an imposing classic tie, while the younger brother Lixel would look better with a more youthful bow tie. While the youth analyzes the 3 suits displayed on the hangers, the tailor gathers courage to ask him a quite unusual and special favor. Andri excitedly asks if the young master himself could give the final touches on the family ties and make the special embroideries on them. Lion widens his eyes and lets out a scream of complete astonishment upon hearing that so unexpected suggestion coming from a renowned professional tailor. The man offers to teach everything about tie sewing and detailed embroideries, but the youth tries to contain him, saying that it is not quite like that. Lion argues that it would be a great lack of respect and boldness to alter or mess with the flawless masterpiece created by a true master tailor. The boy questions the reason for insisting so much on this despite the risks, and the tailor hesitates a bit before starting to reveal his true reasons. Andri shares that, when taking the patriarch's measurements, he confirmed for good that the young noble for whom he made dresses in the past was Lion's mother. He recalls with emotion when the imposing patriarch Patrick lowered his head and thanked him sincerely for having sewn for his late daughter. The tailor focuses his look on the young master and reveals that it was at that moment of revelation that he finally understood the whole truth. He explains with tenderness that, both in the past and now, manufacturing garments with love for dear people means the world to the patriarch. Andri adds that if the grandfather wove the fabric with so much affection for his daughter, the final touch on the grandson's outfits must come exclusively from Lion's hands. He places his hand over Lion's chest and guarantees with affection that the young man's family affection will give a unique touch that no tailor in the world would be capable of. The professional smiles with pride and reflects that, for a true artisan, creating great clothes goes far beyond just cutting and sewing fabrics. Lion gets moved by the tailor's generosity and closes his fist, determined to give his absolute best in crafting the final details of the ties. He removes the white gala jacket and accepts the tailor's invitation to sit at the design table and begin planning the tie's rough sketches. The youth takes his place at the wooden desk and lets him know, confident with pencil in hand, that he already possesses an excellent idea in mind for the drawings. He sketches a classic tie and a bow tie, explaining that he wants to leave clear in the design that his younger brother Lixel is the true heir of the clan. The tailor praises the drawing's proposal and next asks what would be the exact type of design that the young master would like to create for himself. Lion answers that he will decide his style after finishing his grandfather's and brother's, and Andri suggests that they start practicing with a common tie. The tailor explains didactically the anatomical structure of a classic tie, detailing how the fabric parts are named with sword terms. Lion finds funny the names inspired by swords and jokes, telling the tailor to avoid these terms in front of Patrick, who detests fencing. The youth demonstrates knowledge upon asking if they will use interfacing, and Andri smiles surprised with the student's smartness and explains that it will not need. The tailor opens the piece of high-quality white silk on the table and explains that the material will maintain its firm structure in a quite natural way. The tailor smiles radiant and celebrates, saying that finally everything is ready to kick off the practical sewing classes. A system sound warning echoes in the dark visiting room, while Andri observes the youth with a quite surprised expression. Andri fakes liking the result of Lion's first accessory, but the system reveals that the tie got full of visible defects when looking close up. Andri suggests passing to the embroidery stage and asks if Lion has some drawing in mind, and the youth says he wishes to use his family's coat of arms. Upon drawing the leaves connected to the branches, Lion thinks that the coat of arms must have a marking meaning that symbolizes his family's eternal union. The tailor finds the idea extremely poetic and deep, agreeing that they must embroider the drawing with this beautiful meaning in mind. He teaches that texture is the most important part in embroidery, so that the final result looks sophisticated, refined, and well natural, understanding that no shortcuts exist to master the technique. Lion asks for just 3 days to train and promises to finish all the work. Moved by the young master's focus, Andri smiles from ear to ear and declares with enthusiasm that he trusts fully in his potential. Lion spends the following days sewing obsessively like a madman, pricking his fingers quite a bit, but managing to create common ties without stopping. He spends all the patterns left by the tailor and begins to design his own models to continue his intensive sewing training. Out of pure stubbornness, the young man resolves not to use the facilities and guides of the magic kit to guarantee that his actual manual skills evolve for real. Exhausted and with fingers calloused by the needle pricks, Lion lays his head on the table and almost gives up upon seeing that the system still classifies his ties as common. The youth stretches in the chair, complaining of strong pains in the shoulders and fatigue in the eyes after so many consecutive hours of continuous effort. He takes a deep breath and faces his hurt hands, reflecting in silence over all the progress he made up to that moment of the night. Lion refuses to give up so close to the end and holds firm the fabric, realizing that finally he is starting to catch the rhythm and speed of the needle. Suddenly, a strong and bright golden light begins to emanate directly from his hand over the fabric, leaving the young master very surprised. The system announces in a large bright screen that the tailor talent finally awakened due to his relentless effort in the middle of pain. Lion opens a radiant smile from ear to ear and celebrates, relieved to see that his sewing proficiency finally rose a level. Now much more skilled, he cuts the cloths quickly with the scissors, and his proficiency soon reaches level 2 with the work's advance. Upon passing the hot iron with mastery, Lion rises to level 3 and unlocks a new achievement that earns him 3,000 more shillings of bonus. He stops for a quite thoughtful instant and begins to link the dots over how the system's logic works for the awakening of talents. The youth realizes that the crucial point for the awakening of skills is the urgency and the real necessity he feels to create that specific item. He remembers when his blacksmith skill awakened, when he desperately needed agricultural tools to harvest herbs. The same occurred with cooking when he needed oil, while sewing did not awaken before because he lacked a real urgency to use it. Confident with his new discovery, the youth declares that what he needs most at that moment is his sketchbook to finalize the design. Lion celebrates for not using the magic kit guide at the beginning, because now his actual manual skill is enough to create something wonderful. The white tie he sews begins to glow intensely, and the system warns that it gained a bonus due to his artisan touch. Celebrating the activated bonus, he raises his bright needle with confidence and prepares to make the golden embroidery details over the fabric. The final result is a spectacular 3-star tie that glows intensely, thanks to Lion's beautiful and delicate golden embroidery of leaves. Lion adjusts the bright accessory on the collar of his grandfather's dark suit, and the system praises the work, saying it is a true work of art. Upon uniting the pieces, the system announces that the outfits fused into a perfect set. Gaining an extra bonus star for the excellent synergy, the dark suit gains the legendary 4-star rating, becoming a majestic garment that imposes absolute authority and elegance. The heir gets surprised to see that the complete suit gained excellent additional passive effects when equipped, like protection against impacts. Lion excitedly laughs upon noticing that progress for the Grand Tailor achievement advanced, thinking that soon he will complete the mission when finishing the other clothes. He takes a deep breath to maintain concentration and returns to cut the fabrics with quite calm to give start to the Astery family's second suit. After fastening the bow tie on the younger brother's suit, the achievement progress bar rises and Lion celebrates that the second outfit is already ready. He faces the 3 mannequins displayed in the room and thoughtfully realizes that now remains only to resolve the design problem of his own gala outfit. The boy thinks he cannot wear anything too casual for being the event's protagonist, but needs to avoid wearing the same tie styles as his grandfather and brother Lion, suddenly has an excellent design idea, and decides to create a differentiated tie model fastened with a beautiful precious gem at its center. He draws the rough sketch in his notebook and thinks that the main highlight point of the accessory will be the precious gem that will stay positioned in the middle of it. Lion approaches an old and glinting safe and considers choosing one of the beautiful rare jewels his grandfather used to wear in the past for the adornment. Upon opening the box, he runs into several necklaces and rare stones and selects a beautiful bright purple gem that catches his attention significantly. He raises the beautiful precious gem against the light and thinks with a light smile on his face that the purple color resembles a lot the shade of his family's eyes. The youth positions the purple precious stone exactly in the center of the tie and excitedly celebrates upon realizing that the finish of his own outfit is ready. The system glows intensely, announcing the bonus of 15,000 shillings for unlocking the prestigious achievement and reaching an impossible feat for his level. The youth widens his eyes in complete astonishment upon seeing that the system still granted him an additional bonus reward of 10,000 shillings for his prowess. He celebrates for accumulating more than 100,000 shillings and finally unlocking access to shopping in the shilling shop of his virtual game system. Lion prepares excited to access the new virtual shop, but suddenly the door opens with everything with Lixel's arrival. Tearing a scream from the air, Lixel appears at the door with a terrifyingly irritated aura and seriously questions why the older brother is still sewing on the eve of the ceremony. Lixel complains that his brother spent 3 nights awake sewing and worriedly warns that he will end up getting sick before the ceremony's big day. With an extremely serious and intimidating look, Lixel orders that he go lie down immediately. Tearing a startled little scream from the young man, Elvia agrees with Lixel and simply tosses the young master onto her shoulders in a quite easy way, carrying him to the room to rest once and for all. Lying on the bed, Lion cries from frustration for being forced to sleep right now that he just unlocked the so-expected access to the shilling shop. The day of the ceremony finally dawns, bathing the imposing Astery Castle towers with the morning's first golden sun rays. Dressed with his stunning white suit, Lion walks through the corridor alongside Elvia, who praises him saying he is incredibly handsome. The disguised housekeeper especially praises the detail of the young man's tie, and the young master smiles relieved to hear that the fit turned out good. He satisfies thinks that his effort was worth it. Remembering how Tailor Andry cried with emotion and joy upon seeing the finalized outfits, Elvia observes him in silence, with a mild and proud look while they continue walking together toward the main party hall of the clan. Lion admires the horizon and emotionally reflects over how time passed fast and how he finally reached his expected coming-of-age day. Lixel appears walking elegantly through the corridor and asks with a docile smile if the older brother managed to have a good night of sleep. Lion asks, surprised if the younger brother was standing there waiting for him, and the young mage confirms in a polite and joyful way. With his head, Lixel places his hand on his chest respectfully and declares with pride that he will make a point of escorting him personally to the hall's large entrance. The main hall's large and luxurious double doors begin to open slowly, revealing the immense and bright light that comes from inside. Lixel comments in an affectionate tone that the older brother is the true and single protagonist of that large and luxurious party that is about to begin. The hall is richly decorated with imposing crystal chandeliers, and a refined orchestra plays a soft melody for the guests present. The noble guests drink wine and gossip, marveled, commenting that the party seems even more glamorous and rich than an imperial banquet. One of the guests comments that the rumors that Marquis Patrick and the eldest grandson did not get along seem to be just lies of the high court. Suddenly, the herald announces loudly at the gates the official entry of Marquis Patrick, accompanied by his heirs, silencing the hall. Patrick walks in an imposing way through the party hall's red carpet, while the guests whisper upon seeing prodigy Lixil right behind next. The looks of everyone present turn curious to the entry of who comes right next, under the chandelier's intense brightness. Under the applause and the attentive looks of the nobles, the day's great protagonist, Lion Astery, makes his triumphant entry wearing his beautiful suit. The youth descends the steps slowly with enough elegance, while the servants bow and the audience applauds him in a very enthusiastic way. Some nobles gossip maliciously, saying that Lion does not look as imposing as Lixil, and question where his bad reputation of weirdo would have ended up. Patriarch Patrick discreetly calls his eldest grandson, and the boy answers in a very polite and respectful way to his grandfather's call at the party. The elderly man points with disdain to a group of guests whispering and advises his grandson not to even mix with people of character so bad and doubtful. Patrick changes the subject, feigning coldness, and warns him to prepare mentally, because soon he will have to give a speech to announce the party's start. Lion laughs, and guarantees he will bring no shame to the clan's name. While Patrick proudly thinks that deep down his grandson cares a lot about that, the young man walks confident through the carpet and reflects that he has not the slightest intention to mix with opportunists, because his true goal there is another. He bows elegantly before everyone and introduces himself loudly as Lion Astery, celebrating his late and important arrival to coming of age while giving his speech with mastery. Lion thinks that his single focus at that moment is leaving an excellent and flawless impression of his entire family. The boy thanks the presence of all heirs gathered there, but suddenly Lixil lets out a murmur of total surprise upon hearing him speak. Lixil observes him fascinated with the heir's brilliant oratory and wonders, surprised, if the older brother always possessed such an imposing presence. The malicious whispers cease and the guests whisper, impressed over how young Lion suddenly seems to attract all the hall's attention. A young noblewoman comments that, despite the young man looking common, the clothes he is wearing somehow look extremely rich and special. Other guests agree immediately, and comment admired that wonderful white suit seems to elevate and enhance Lion's natural beauty. The court ladies hide their faces behind their red fans and ask, curious, whose authorship would be that so fantastic suit design. Crossing his arms with satisfaction, Patrick comments, smiling from the corner, that the eldest grandson knew how to use intelligence very well for that occasion. Lixil wonders if his brother calculated everything up to there, and the grandfather proudly agrees that Lion proved to be an extremely perceptive and intelligent heir. Lion closes his official speech thanking everyone's presence and inviting those present to enjoy the party at will until the next day. The heir wishes everyone an excellent and fun party. Bowing under a warm and vibrant round of applause coming from the entire main hall, Lixil runs, excited, toward his older brother and congratulates him from ear to ear, saying with enthusiasm that his speech was spectacular. The youngest asks, surprised, when he had time to rehearse, and Lion laughs awkwardly and thinks that smooth talk came from his long corporate life in the real world. Patrick approaches, imposing, and praises, saying that the family blood does not deny the talent to demonstrate such dignity, even without possessing mana and aura. The patriarch congratulates his grandson with a sincere and warm smile on his face, and the young master thanks from the heart for all that affection and approval. The two brothers smile complicit and happily agree with their grandfather that finally the ideal time arrived to go enjoy the party banquet together. The banquet follows, packed with delicious dishes and fine sweets, while the orchestra continues playing beautiful classical melodies in the background in the hall. Seated at a reserved table on the balcony, Patrick savors his meal and asks if the eldest grandson has already chosen what he will take to the ritual. Lion takes a sip of wine and thoughtfully reflects that, depending on the item taken as an offering to the magical labyrinth, the spell obtained at the end changes. He remembers that books give magical wisdom and staffs give attack magic, but for not being a common mage, his result in tomorrow's ritual is a mystery. Lion thinks a bit while holding his wine glass and decides what he is going to do. He tells his grandfather and brother that he plans to take the potion he himself made. Patrick and Lixil look surprised at the young man, and Lixil says he is not sure about that. Lion explains that he will take one of his potions because he has no talent for magic and nothing with a good rating yet. He reflects that even his 4-star clothes were made by Andri, remaining to him to take his best work. Patrick agrees, saying it is a good choice, since the labyrinth will teach knowledge suitable to his skills. The grandfather then says there is one more thing he would like to ask his eldest grandson. Patrick asks if Lion has any interest in politics or in becoming the heir, and he answers no immediately. The grandfather gets surprised with the speed of the answer, and Lion guarantees he has the least interest in that. Lion completes saying that he always believed that Lixil would be the head of the family, leaving the younger brother emotional. Upon hearing this, Patrick looks serious at Lixil and calls him. Patrick asks if he will value his brother like life itself, and Lixil swears by the family honor and by his manhwa. The grandfather drinks his wine and says it is settled, leaving the two brothers quite confused. Patrick gets extremely relieved to resolve a succession problem so big in a way so fast. He feels desire to brag, but remembers that the greatest current threats are the imperial family and the famous fencing house. The patriarch reflects that the imperial family is still fighting for their own succession, so they are not a concern now. He concludes that the real problem is the house of Videntis. Their brutal inheritance dispute ended shortly ago, and they say a young woman carried the entire bloodbath to rebuild the clan. Patrick finds them barbaric and prefers not to cross their path. Even knowing that their situation is advantageous for the Asteri, Patrick accepts his grandson's decision and tells him to continue living as he best sees fit, and Lion asks if it will not cause problems. The grandfather tells him to go ahead if he wants, but makes a mysterious caveat that leaves the young man curious. Patrick warns with a terrifying look that he will not forgive him if he gets hurt, and Lion thinks his grandfather is going to end up finishing him off first. The youth promises to take care of himself properly, and Patrick stays satisfied and suggests they finish the meal in peace. In the party hall, Lion walks happily with his wine glass in hand and observes the environment. He realizes that his grandfather and brother are having difficulties dealing with so many annoying nobles at the party. But Lion knows that he also has an important task to perform at that moment. Shortly after, he is interrupted by a voice that greets him cordially. The woman asks who designed that beautiful clothing, and Lion gets happy for finally having his first client. Soon, several other people approach and say they also want very much to know who made his clothes. The youth gets surprised with so many people appearing and wonders if this is because of the effect of the 4-star clothing. He says there is something concerning about the subject. Leaving the noblewoman of the red fan quite confused, Lion reveals that the designer is the illegitimate son of a noble family and was cast out from nobility for selling clothes to commoners. The woman is shocked that they still reject tailors for that, and the man says that the first prince's allies care a lot about that. Lion thinks that maybe Andri became a victim of public opinion due to the political rivalry between the kingdom's two princes. He offers to introduce him in case it does not bother them, and the nobles guarantee that they only have interest in the wonderful clothes. Lion smiles and says it would be rude to continue hiding the tailor facing so much interest. Deciding finally to reveal him, he reveals that the tailor is Andri, and the noblewoman is shocked to discover that he was under the Asteri family's protection the whole time. Lion alerts that only 3 reservation spots remain today, making the nobles despair immediately with the scarcity. Suddenly, a firm and mysterious voice arises asking for them to wait a moment. The crowd opens while an imposing woman walks in direction to young Lion. She is Clarentia Videntis, leader of the famous fencing house, and asks if the tailor really accepts any type of request. Lion greets her formally, while people gossip wondering what type of beautiful dress she would order. Lion gets surprised with the interest of that fencing house and politely asks what type of garment she would like to order. She answers in a serious way that she would like to order training clothes and also comfortable clothes for the day-to-day. The nobles around begin to break into a cold sweat of terror with the presence and the conversation of that so intimidating woman. She explains with a terrifying and dark look that her old clothes simply cannot be used anymore. Terrified, the guests begin to invent several ridiculous excuses and flee running from the party hall at once. With the general stampede, Lion and Clarentia stay completely alone in the middle of the hall in an awkward silence. The youth understands people's fear, but thinks that a client is still a client and ignores the terrible rumors about her. Lion activates his salesman mode and warns that the order can delay for being large, and Clarentia accepts and asks about the deposit. Clarentia lets him know she will resolve the payment details separately as soon as the party ends. Lion gets relieved to see that the conversation ended easier than he expected and prepares for the next step. He lets the guests know that reservation spots have already sold out and asks if someone else would like to enter the waiting line. Lion's strategy works perfectly, with several nobles guaranteeing their reservations excited with Andri's new clothes. Looking at his order list, Lion thinks that this certainly is going to leave Tailor Andri very happy and fulfilled at this moment. Housekeeper Elvia calls him, saying the patriarch announced that the ritual test is already ready to begin. Lion walks in an imposing way to the massive black and golden doors of the library labyrinth. He is approached by the first prince, who ironizes, saying that that is the expected of the eldest grandson of a family so famous for magic, Crown Prince. Terrace mocks in a sarcastic way and asks the youth if he is not even a bit nervous with the test. Lion smiles awkwardly upon realizing that the prince knows very well that he cannot use magic, but politely answers that he is not nervous. But Lixil approaches in an imposing way and questions for what reason his beloved older brother should be nervous with. That Lion observes the two staring at each other and thinks that Lixil looks a lot like their grandfather when he gets angry, acting in a totally different way. Prince Terrace gets visibly irritated, but decides to mask the discomfort and retires, saying he is going to return to his seat. Lixil then delivers a vial to his brother and asks for him to take a lot of care with the potion he had requested before Lion thanks his younger brother's support and prepares to face the big challenge of the ritual that is about to begin. He enters the library and remembers with nostalgia when he used to hide there in childhood for not having awakened any talent. The youth approaches the magical door and wonders what type of treasure the first patriarch would have hidden there after the war against the demons. The youth receives a magical dagger from one of the maids and thinks that that must be an item of extreme value for the system. Lion then uses the dagger to make a small cut on his finger, letting a drop of blood fall over the carpet to activate the seal. Instantly, the magical transmutation circle under his feet begins to glow intensely with a bluish light. On the outside, the guests feel the castle's strong vibration and comment, startled that just the opening of the door already causes that tremor. The labyrinth's immense doors begin to open slowly, releasing a massive blast of wind and magical dust through the hall. Lion gets in shock when the strong spiral magical energy begins to wrap him in a very violent way. The desk-controlled mana torrent begins to pull the young youth with a lot of strength into the labyrinth's darkness. The system explains that the library can be overcome without trials, but it will turn into a deadly dungeon if someone acts with greed inside there. However, things begin to leave totally out of control while the castle trembles violently because of the mana release. In the main hall, the princes and nobles scream in panic, not understanding what is happening, and ask for everyone to take care. Lion realizes there is something wrong and wonders if the opening of the library labyrinth should be so violent in that way. The youth is swallowed by the terrible bluish mana storm and lets out a scream of surprise upon being pulled without being able to do anything. He tries to resist the immense magical pressure, but the desk-controlled torrent continues dragging his body with a lot of violence. Lixil and Patrick run desperate in direction to the portal, screaming for the air, while wondering what is going to happen to him. At this moment, a floating system window warns that a special achievement in the book labyrinth was unlocked with success. Lion gains permission to read all books, besides receiving bonuses in his intelligence, permanent increase of mana, and a pure mana circle. The main hall continues trembling, and the plates fall to the floor while the guests scream, terrified with the sudden earthquake. The wine glasses and cups shatter on the table, while people run desperate, screaming for help and looking for the marquee. The gigantic black iron chandelier on the banquet hall ceiling detaches and begins to plunge in direction to the startled crowd. A young noblewoman points desperate and screams, horrified upon realizing that the giant chandelier is falling directly over them. Suddenly, a yellow hexagonal magical barrier appears in the air and blocks the massive chandelier before it hits people. One of the nobles breathes relieved to see he is alive and realizes that that bright protection is Lord Patrick's protective barrier. The entire castle is wrapped by the Archmage's gigantic golden mana shield, guaranteeing the total safety of all present. Patrick remains imposing in the middle of the hall, maintaining his protection spell active with extreme ease and mastery. He orders Knight Rixon to run to the banquet hall to guide and protect the guests who are already under the barrier. Lixil runs, hurried to his grandfather, demonstrating much concern with the gravity of the situation in which they find themselves. The youngest asks what is happening, and Patrick answers serious that the library left out of control and that he already ordered to evacuate all guests. The elderly man shows himself concerned with the royal heirs and asks immediately where the princes are in the middle of all that confusion. Prince Terrace appears and lets him know that Lixil used a protection spell on them and that everyone is completely safe for now. Patrick gets relieved to hear they are all fine. While observing the damage caused by the tremors in the castle hall, the grandfather orders Lixil to send healers to take care of the wounded and prepare a safe rest area for the remainder of the guests. The patriarch lets him know he is going to stay to personally protect the labyrinth entrance, leaving Lixil completely shocked with his decision. The youth tries to protest, saying it is far too dangerous and that he wants to stay to help, but Patrick cuts him immediately with a firm no. Patrick reminds his youngest grandson that he must fulfill his duty as the family's next head. The prince lets him know it is very dangerous for not knowing the labyrinth's state, but Patrick laughs and ironizes all that sudden concern. The patriarch firmly orders for Lixil to leave from there at that instant, leaving the youth reluctant and thoughtful. The prince tries to reassure them, saying that Lion will be fine, while the other prince decides to help evacuate people. Lixil clenches his fists concerned and thinks of his older brother who is still trapped inside there in the portal. With a tight heart, the youngest finally decides to retire from the place, along with the two imperial princes alone. Patrick reflects concerned that the labyrinth is unstable, and that he could not risk losing Lixil there too. Suddenly, steps echo through the hall and someone questions why he still continues standing there in the middle of that emergency. It is Clarentia, leader of the Videntis house, who directly asks the patriarch the reason for him not having evacuated yet. She notices the Marquis's tranquility and comments that he seems very sure that the eldest grandson continues alive inside there. The woman completes saying that he acts as if he already knew exactly how all that situation is going to end. Patrick gets extremely surprised when Clarentia suddenly offers help to resolve that big problem. The Marquis questions the reason for the help, since it would be much more advantageous for her family if they did not help them now. She explains that she ordered clothes with their protected tailor and that she hates when her plans end up going wrong. That said, the fencing house leader lets him know she will continue nearby, awaiting his orders in the rear guard. She retires slowly while the Marquis observes her from afar, alongside his loyal servant. Patrick praises Clarentia's incredible perception, and the housekeeper agrees, saying she truly is very perceptive. He then orders for Elvia to create a powerful magical barrier around the entire labyrinth entrance. The patriarch states with seriousness that no information regarding the incident can leak to the outside world in any way. With a golden watch in hands, he begins to use magic to restore the entire destroyed facade of the place. He thinks that, by doing that, maybe he manages to open a small breach to help Lion escape from inside there. Meanwhile, in a beautiful sunny field full of colorful flowers, a peaceful melody begins to echo through the air. A beautiful blue butterfly lands over a flower, while Lion continues humming in a very relaxed way. He observes the system message, and confused, realizes that the achievement means that he somehow completed the labyrinth. The youth lies lazily on the flowery lawn and admits he has not the slightest idea what he did to win the challenge. He sits and tries to pull from memory to remember how this dungeon worked in the original game. Lion concludes that that is the reward area, and that, for already having cleared the labyrinth, it must be a totally safe place. The system asks if he wants to break the dungeon illusion, and the boy remembers that in the game, it was enough to click yes to gather the prize. He reflects that the original Lion entered and left from there without problems, wondering if the current desk control occurred due to his own mana. He realizes that this makes no sense, because if only mana mattered, his magical family would walk around there as if they were at home. At this, Lion begins to suspect that all this bizarre change has something to do with the fact of him having reincarnated into this body. He recalls that his grandfather had said that he hid the treasure there after finishing the demon war along with the hero 50 years ago. The youth remembers that the legendary hero vanished without leaving traces after the end of that war and gets intrigued with the mystery. He realizes that the labyrinth completed itself when he entered, indicating that maybe the dungeon sees him as another person. Lion remembers that the war scenario is the same as the game where players assumed exactly the role of the hero to save the world. The boy begins to break into a cold sweat upon deducing that, if the treasure belonged to the hero, that must be the equipment from his old main account. He knows it can be a big logical leap, but the fact is that every player who entered that world assumed the figure of the legendary hero being so. Lion realizes that the big treasure hidden by his grandfather is, in reality, an item that belonged to his own avatar. He concludes that this would explain why the system understood that he was just recovering an item that was already stored in the place. As he cannot stay there forever with just one mana circle, Lion realizes that his only real option is to physically force his exit. He begins to walk through the flowery field, confident that there must exist some way to escape from there, even with his low level. Suddenly, the youth feels that he stepped on something different in the middle of the lawn and stops his walk quite confused. He notices the rare white flowers and realizes, looking closer, that they seem to have been planted following a very specific pattern. He also notices the yellow and purple flowers, confirming that the entire map follows a predetermined planting scheme. Lion thinks that, as only one species should grow per zone, seeing them all mixed in that way can only mean one thing. He concludes that that large area was subdivided and that all those plants were placed there in a totally artificial way. He smiles, deducing that, in the place where the flowers break the rules, the key to his escape must be enough to find the strangest point. He locates a point where incompatible flowers are growing together in a same bed and runs to investigate the exact place. Lion closes his eyes and concentrates deeply, focusing only on the beat of his own heart to attune his energy. Following this pace, he sinks his mind into his own body and, fascinated, locates his first mana circle glowing intensely. The system confirms with success the activation of the mana circle and lets him know he can already check all data about it. Lion takes a deep breath, tries to maintain focus, and concentrates to make the mana flow become visible before his eyes. Upon channeling the mana, the system warns that the expert eye skill was enhanced and that he can maintain it active for 10 minutes. Lion gets startled upon seeing the energy flow and realizes that that point with the 3 plants together was, in reality, a deadly trap. He notices that if he stepped wrong there, he would activate a dangerous magic, concluding also that the exit key must not be in that place. Smiling determined, the youth decides that he needs to continue moving through the flowery field to find the correct point. The youth walks with care through the immense flowery lawn, observing the magical flows glowing around him. Upon taking one more step, a new distorted system window arises at his front, leaving him quite surprised. The enhanced expert eye reveals the true name of that hidden zone, and Lion celebrates knowing that finally he found the place. The screen indicates that there is the source of the illusion's mana thread, and Lion crouches, asking himself if he will need to dig to manage to reach it. He realizes he needs something to cut the mana thread and decides to open the system's shilling shop to look for useful tools. For having accumulated more than 100,000 shillings, the system warns that all items of the bronze-level shop were finally released for purchase. He realizes that a new tab called Survival was released, being exactly the category he needs most at that moment. He looks at the absurd prices of an escape chair and an old key, thinking outraged that that shop can only be a fake. Besides the prices, he complains for seeing useless things and wonders if there is no option to filter only what he manages to pay. The system answers immediately, asking if he would like to apply a search filter, leaving the boy quite excited. He asks for the system to show items below 120,000 shillings, from the lowest price to the highest, including the ones that have discounts. Lion gets satisfied for seeing the list more organized, but realizes that most cheap items have conditions of use that do not help. Now he analyzes the options and concludes that a magic detector and sharp scissors with 99% discount are the best there. The detector is tempting, but far too expensive, so he decides to take the scissors for knowing that his current skills would not suffice for the detector. Lion extends his finger with firmness and clicks on the system button to confirm the purchase of the scissors in an immediate way. The youth holds the bright scissors and laughing laments that all the shillings he saved with so much effort vanished in the blink of an eye. Even so, he gets happy that the tool now is bound to his soul in a permanent way and hopes that it resolves the problem. Looking at the concentrated mana flow, the youth prepares to remove the source that is generating all that magical illusion in the field. He pulls his small shovel and proudly comments that all his daily effort collecting materials made the task of digging something very simple. With fast and precise movements, the heir begins to dig the dirt with enough enthusiasm at the exact point indicated by the system. The system warns that only 1 minute remains for the end of the expert eye enhancement, leaving the youth in a race against time. Lion gets tense upon seeing the notice of the time ending so fast and hurries even more his excavations, trying to finish in time. Suddenly, the metal tool hits something solid buried in the ground, causing the youth to give a scream of joy upon realizing he found it. Knowing he has no time to lose, he pulls the object with enough strength to remove it once and for all from the bottom of the hole. Lion holds a beautiful bright chest wrapped by blue magical threads and gets fascinated upon seeing that it is identical to the game's prize chest. With the countdown of only 10 seconds appearing on the screen, the youth holds the scissors with firmness to cut the blue threads. Lacking very few seconds for the time to end, Lion makes a fast and precise cut, parting the mana threads in half at once. In the same instant in which the expert skill expires, the chest begins to glow intensely with a beautiful golden light. The system window asks if he would like to redeem his big reward, and the youth answers in an immediate way, confirming yes. The item is sent to his inventory, and the system warns that it was bound again, proving to Lion that that prize was truly his. But before he could think of how to leave from there, a message warns about the start of a mandatory story mode, leaving him confused. The youth begins to break into a cold sweat, while reality around him distorts, asking himself desperate what is going to happen now to him. Meanwhile, in the castle corridor, Marquis Patrick and young Lixel talk in a very serious way, surrounded by their elite guards. Patrick asks if the external damage control was done, and Lixel answers that he calmed everyone, inventing that the tremor was a common earthquake. He adds that he obtained the cooperation of both princes, and that the leader of the Videntis house also promised to avoid that rumors spread. Patrick, satisfied, agrees that rumors will not circulate, and thinks that, in the end, the first prince's incompetence was very useful. Now Lixel asks about the temple and the underworld, guaranteeing that he acted fast so that no one discovers where his older brother went. The Marquis praises his grandson's great work, and concerned thinks that information regarding Lion must never leak to those two factions. He recalls that the temple archbishop is obsessed with investigating any subject that has relation to the hero's old figure. On the other hand, the underworld was founded by the hero's old companions and became one of the greatest secret powers of that world. Both factions have skilled spies, and, if the family does not take care, they soon will discover that Lion possesses a very special power. The patriarch knows very well that in reality, his eldest grandson is deeply linked to the hero's legend from 50 years ago. The first proof was the hero's potion, and the second was the dungeon, leaving out of control in the instant in which Lion entered the place of the hidden treasure. Patrick Sirius concludes that a massive secret exists regarding all that situation of which not even Lion himself has knowledge. Yet Patrick warns with much seriousness that they must maintain that information in total secret until they discover what it truly is about. Suddenly, the labyrinth's massive gate begins to tremble again in a very violent way, calling everyone's attention there. The Marquis orders for everyone to prepare for impact, while Lixel warns, startled, that he can feel a giant energy coming from inside there. A whirlwind of bright purple light forms in the center of the gate, indicating that something is about to leave from there at this. A mysterious object shoots out at high speed from inside the portal and hits Patrick's forehead squarely. At once, Lixel picks up the object that fell to the floor and stammers surprised upon realizing what it is, while the grandfather trembles with anger for being hit. He analyzes the small piece of folded paper and confused wonders if that would be a message written by someone with trembling hands. The youngest begins to unfold the mysterious note to manage to read what is written on it. Lixel realizes that the message was written with much haste, but immediately recognizes his brother's handwriting and notices that there is no blood on it. The patriarch approaches, still very serious, and directly asks what is written on Lion's note. Lixel begins to break into a cold sweat and hesitantly answers that the message says the following regarding his brother's situation. Meanwhile, a system screen officially confirms Lion's entry into the labyrinth's mandatory story mode. Lion wakes up feeling a strong headache and, upon seeing the system preparing a memory video, realizes that he entered indeed the story mode. He observes 3 mysterious figures at his front and deduces by the title that that concerns another person's recorded memories. In the remembrance video, the legendary hero says that the item is no longer necessary and asks for Patrick to take care of the chest. Lion gets shocked upon hearing his grandfather's name and realizes that he is seeing the exact day in which Patrick received the legendary hero's chest. He tries to listen to the conversation, but the audio fails and he gets irritated for not remembering who that hero is, for having created the character in a random way. Young Patrick accepts the hero's request and promises to keep that valuable chest in total safety starting from that moment. The system warns that the peek into the saved memory was concluded with success and immediately initiates the story mode closure. Lion wakes up back to the destroyed library and surprised complains that the video ended in a too fast way, stays grumbling for thinking that the scene looked extremely important, but that in the end, it almost gave him no useful information. The youth deduces that the conversation happened in the middle of the demon war, and that they entrusted the chest to his grandfather to be used in the future. Lion opens the chest and finds 2 beautiful silvery jewels, which the system identifies as an accessory set capable of hiding his information. He remembers that in the game this item was not difficult to get, serving only to disguise the level or to win an excellent experience bonus. He concludes that his jewels were left with his grandfather by his old characters and celebrates for being able to use them now to hide his mana. Lion accepts the system's suggestion and answers yes to check all detailed information regarding his newly discovered mana circle. He gets shocked upon seeing the system analysis and realizes that, despite being only the first circle, it is capable of storing a bizarre amount of mana. He reflects that ordinary people spend their whole lives meditating to manage to expand their capacity and reach superior circles. Being so, the youth wonders, intrigued, for what reason his first circle is so absurdly giant in comparison with the others. Leaving the concerns aside, he opens a smile and happily thinks that having a lot of mana at the end of the day is something excellent. Lion celebrates that the mana disguise is going to work, and Satisfying thinks that his coming-of-age ritual ended up being an absolute success. However, shortly next, the young heir realizes that he still has a small and important detail to resolve immediately. He looks around and with concern remembers that he still continues completely trapped inside there in the library's destroyed labyrinth. Lion resolves to walk through the ruins and thinks of looking for some secret exit or passage that takes him back to the castle. The system emits an access denied alert for lack of authorization and reveals that the new master of the place is Lion Asteri himself, leaving him stunned. He deduces that he became the master for having overcome the local challenge, but concerned laments because that did not make part of his original plans. The system warns that the entrance is broken and initiating auto-repair, leaving Lion concerned with the immense mess in which the place finds itself. He imagines his grandfather giving a terrifying lecture for all that destruction and desperate thinks about what to do to avoid that giant scolding. Suddenly, a brilliant idea arises in his mind, and he wonders if, for being the new master, he would not have the power to fix everything alone. The system offers the option to reset the labyrinth, but Lion refuses for knowing that he would lose his treasure and all the historical books from there. The youth asks if there is another way, and the screen suggests a manual adjustment to restore the place, warning that the resource delivery will delay. He compares the option with changing a saved game file and calculates the best date to revert the labyrinth's state without losing anything. He chooses to restore to the state of 1 week ago without losing his new items and asks how much time it is going to take to conclude the repair. The system reveals that it is going to delay 672 hours, causing Lion to give a scream of pure horror upon realizing that he will stay trapped 1 month. He asks if he can walk freely through the library while the repair happens, and the system confirms that the master has free access to everything. He asks if there is a way to send messages outside and, upon discovering the book return box, decides to write a note to calm the family satisfied with the plan. The heir smiles from the corner and prepares to give start to the entire magical process of environment prevention. Lion gives the start command and an immense circle of greenish energy begins to rotate around him to begin the repair work. Thanks to the system's powerful magic, the destroyed books begin to float in the air and to return orderly to their respective shelves. Seeing the timer initiate, Lion celebrates the plan's success and asks for the system to transport him directly to the dungeon's final area. Lion gets fascinated upon being teleported instantly and thinks that that is a very useful function of the master system. The youth reflects that now he only needs to find a way to survive inside there for a whole month, but suddenly notices something at his front. Lion widens his eyes with surprise upon seeing a massive and gorgeous lake right in the middle of that book labyrinth. He stays impressed with the lake's size inside the labyrinth and stays relieved upon noticing that the place does not look even a bit dangerous. The system begins to describe the aquatic fauna with complex scientific terms, making Lion ask for a far simpler explanation. The system explains that there are several edible fish in the water and reveals that there exists only a single rare-level fish in that lake. The system warns that fishing in the lake was officially unlocked under the authority of the library labyrinth's new master. He realizes that even released he lacks a fishing rod, but soon remembers that he already has a perfect tool stored. Shortly after, a fishing bobber floats in a peaceful way in the lake's crystal waters, while he hums undisturbed. Seated in a comfortable chair, he gives thanks for having bought the fishing rod in the shilling shop, despite it having cost expensive. The youth confesses he was ready to eat the bait if he needed, but stays happy for already having managed to capture some tiny one-star fishes. Lion relaxes in his camping chair, and content thinks that at least he runs no more the risk of dying of hunger inside there. Suddenly, his rod's bobber is pulled down in a very violent way, causing the youth to give a start of surprise. Feeling the strong tug, Lion holds the rod with firmness and realizes that that fish is totally different from everything he fished before. He stays impressed with the fish's incredible strength on the line, which makes his fishing rod tip bend in an extreme way. Lion realizes that the strength is no joke and concentrates to pull the line very slowly so as not to let the big fish escape. The youth tells himself not to rush and continues controlling the line tension with enough patience and care. Suddenly, a massive purple fish leaps out of the water and the system congratulates Lion for successfully capturing a 2-star labyrinth carp. Holding the massive purple fish in his arms, Lion is fascinated to see that the animal is truly gigantic and very heavy. He trembles with excitement at the incredible feeling of that fishing trip and finally understands the reason why people get so addicted to it. For understanding the true essence of fishing, the system notes that he awakened a new fishing talent at the apprentice level. He places the fish in the basket and celebrates, saying that that nutritious carp is exactly what his fragile body is needing. Lion observes the beautiful field around the lake and decides that his first task now must be arranging a good place to cook with a simple system command. Several kitchen and camping utensils begin to materialize before him in a magical way. He arranges the items on the table and comments that he bought all of that in case Lixil got sick in the forest, but that now the gear was very useful. While searching through his belongings, Lion notices a dark and bright object stored in his bag and curiously asks what that is. The system reveals that it is a free bonus magic flint, leaving him happy for being able to light a campfire in a much simpler way. With a fast movement, the youth scrapes the flint, and a strong orange flame arises instantly in a magical way on the wood. Lion observes the fire crackle under the afternoon's reddish sky and satisfied comments over how the camping mood got cozy. Next, the youth rolls up his sleeves and places the massive purple carp over the wooden board to give start to its preparation. Lion holds the carp with firmness and begins to make precise cuts on the fish's bright skin to clean it in an adequate way. He decides to roast the fish in a rustic way, while the system warns that the guts improper for eating are perfect for alchemy. He reads the system information and gets quite excited upon discovering that he can take advantage of the fish's internal parts in his potions. Without losing time, the youth gathers the carp's guts with his hands and throws them directly inside his alchemy cauldron. Lion gets surprised upon seeing the cauldron begin to boil by itself in the same instant in which he throws the ingredients, finding everything very practical. He assembles skewers with vegetables and happily thinks that any food placed on a skewer somehow seems to look much tastier. He skewers the carp with the head turned downward, as he knows that that way the excess fat drains and all the juicy flavor stays preserved. In this way, the roasted fish stays with an extremely crunchy crust on the outside, and with the meat super soft and juicy on the inside. He rests the skewers around the campfire flames and celebrates, saying that his rustic carp roast is already ready to begin to brown. While the fish roasts slowly in the campfire, Lion looks to a large tree and decides that it is time to start preparing his bed to sleep. The youth begins to remove some large stones from the flat lawn and grumbles quietly that clearing the terrain takes a certain physical work. But he smiles, thinking that the extra effort is worth it to secure that romantic and cozy camping vibe under the stars. He finishes assembling his sleeping bag under the tree canopy and looks at the final result, quite satisfied with the place's comfort upon. Turning back to the campfire, the youth happily realizes that the preparation time of his dinner also ended up fitting perfectly. He removes the fish from the fire with a radiant smile on his face, feeling the delicious aroma of the golden roast invade the entire environment. The system analyzes the 2-star roasted carp and warns that, after the simple method, it guarantees fullness and has special properties. He notices a warning in the description and asks himself if that means that he only can eat the labyrinth's delicacies while he is inside there. Without minding much about the technical details, the youth takes a massive bite of the roasted fish and lets out a murmur of pure satisfaction. The fish's scaly skin got golden and crunchy as if it had been fried, while the white meat on the inside falls apart from being so soft. But what most impresses the young heir is the incredibly rich and tasty aroma of the roasted fish, which opens even more his appetite. Lion cries with emotion with the incredible flavor and thinks that that fish would be perfect to eat accompanied by rice and kimchi. He comments that the common carp has a dirt taste, but that carp has no bad smell nor bones, giving a desire to divide with someone. The system surprises him upon warning that eating the roasted carp permanently increased his maximum mana capacity. Lion gets totally shocked and looks to the starlit sky without managing to believe in that meal's extraordinary effect. Upon analyzing his energy bar, the youth confirms that his mana truly increased and gets stunned upon seeing that it is possible to evolve just eating. He thinks that the mages from outside would dry the lake if they knew about this, and asks himself if this fantastic effect would also work with Lixil. The youth smiles from the corner and decides that for sure he will store a bit of that special fish to give to his youngest brother later. Next, he decides to give a look at his alchemy cauldron to see the result of the ingredient he threw inside there, before he finds a bright pearl called carp essence, which the system says permanently increases the mana recovery rate. Lion holds the bright pearl fascinated for being his first expert-level item, deducing that its effects must be gigantic. The young master stays thoughtful for some seconds, and soon opens a malicious smile of pure satisfaction with his new discovery. He decides to store the precious item in the inventory for now, remembering that he could not focus on alchemy lately because of the events. Lion recalls that he spent the last days collecting all the herbs he found, accumulating an excellent variety of rare plants. Besides that, the labyrinth is packed with fresh ingredients full of mana, and the best of all is that there is no one there to disrupt him. Looking around with an excited smile on his face, the youth realizes that, technically speaking, that closed labyrinth is another thing. He, fascinated, concludes that that isolated place is, in reality, his own exclusive field to level up in a fast and safe way. Lion rubs his hands, excited upon realizing that there are much more valuable resources for him to loot and explore inside there than he imagined before. But he decides that, before starting any exploration, the maximum priority now is finishing savoring his delicious roasted fish. Spent some time in the labyrinth, the youth celebrates a lot upon managing to successfully capture 3 one-star level giant crawfishes. Lion raises his fishing net full of blue crawfishes and, smiling, asks himself if he is just with a lot of luck in that day's fishing trips. Upon storing the creatures in the inventory, he remembers that he still has flour left over and thinks of using it to make a delicious homemade soup. The youth walks barefoot through the soft grass and, satisfied, thinks that he is getting used very well to that peaceful life inside the labyrinth. He shares that his morning routine consists of gathering the fish traps and checking if the plantings near the forest are growing. Upon approaching his plantings, he stays satisfied upon noticing that his banana sweet potatoes look very healthy and attractive. Lion crouches to observe the bed and decides that today he will focus his efforts on collecting other types of ingredients in the forest. The system goes listing several resources found by him, like spicy fruits, nutritious mushrooms, and golden labyrinth daisies. He harvests a beautiful bouquet of white daisies and comments that, besides being very pretty, they are rare and very recommended for decoration. Lion thinks that it would be great to plant some of those flowers near his camp, but suddenly lets out a murmur of total surprise. He widens his eyes upon reading the system description again and focuses on the detail that each flower's sale price is 300 shillings. Lion stays completely without words upon realizing that those simple flowers harvested from the floor can really be sold for real money.